that your body is betraying you in other ways, that I can smell you, little Osha, and I'm thinking about drinking the sweet nectar you're making for me straight from the cup. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Straight to horny jail with you. Is this supposed to, did I just get tricked into reading erotica? Is that what this is? I wasn't capable of feeling bad about that. There would be time for guilt aplenty later, except she won't feel guilty later. She won't think about it at all. You have to be kidding. It has to be a parody, right? I am losing my mind. Stop making it weird. Oh, also he's like a literal shadow daddy. Is this where the shadow daddy thing came from? Like he walks around in tendrils of darkness, follow in his wake. Is he the blueprint for the shadow daddy? Or is he just yet another in a long line of daddies of the shadow? His smile was pure, powerful male satisfaction. Hold on tight then. I hope you're not afraid of the dark. Is that his catchphrase or something? He has to have said that to literally every person he's ever f***ed, right? Like that can't be something he came up with on the spot. He definitely practiced that in the mirror. You're telling me that the lore in this world is that fae started as vampires? Are you okay? Quicksilver by Callie Hart. This book has taken the romantasy fandom by storm. It has been talked about and recommended and reviewed and debated on every single social media platform that I know how to use as a millennial. So obviously it was on my radar. I'd heard about this book, but it wasn't on my TBR because while I do read a lot of fantasy, it's my most read genre. It's one of my favorite genres to read. I don't read a huge amount of romantasy. I feel like I often don't get what I am looking for when I pick up romantasy. But then as I was planning and starting to read for my Goodreads Choice Awards winners video that I make every single year, you can check out the latest one, I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't going to be reading the winner in the romantasy category. It was book 3 in a trilogy by an author whose work I don't enjoy, and I did not want to put myself through that pain and suffering. But then I thought that I might try to read the runner-up as a consolation prize. The runner-up was book 2 in a series, so I would have had to read 2 books for the price of 1, and it wasn't even officially the winner, so that was a no-go. But the book that came in 3rd place in the romantasy category for the Goodreads Choice Awards 2024 was Quicksilver. And I thought, why not? It's the first book in a series. It's very popular. Maybe I'll have fun. Fast forward to 24 hours later, I was 10% of the way through the book and who I assumed to be the male love interest was introduced, and I just couldn't. I couldn't continue. But because I knew this was such a popular book, I thought maybe there was a chance that it gets better later on, that it isn't as tropey as it seems like it might be, that maybe if I gave it more of a chance, I would enjoy it. So I kind of posted feelers around on different social medias, and I even mentioned it in my Goodreads winners video. The response was pretty overwhelming across multiple platforms, letting me know that they really wanted me to read this book and to review it. I should probably add that the majority of the people who requested I read and review this book also told me simultaneously that they think I'll hate it. So a lot of you want me to suffer. I decided I would give Quicksilver another chance. I'm gonna start again from the beginning because it's been now probably 3 weeks since I read the first 10%. So I'm gonna start fresh. And because this is a single book reading vlog, which I think I've only ever done once before when I read Fourth Wing, which was a whole experience, I am going to do more check-ins than usual. Instead of just checking in at the halfway mark and then at the end, I'm gonna check in at a quarter, halfway, 3/4, and at the end. As per usual, I will share my non-spoilery thoughts, and then if I really have spoilers I need to talk about, I will clearly indicate both in the chapters and on screen and verbally tell you that spoilers are coming so you can skip over them if you want to, or if you are just morbidly curious and want to watch the spoilers, whether you've read the book or not, you can do that too. That is the plan. That is what we're doing for this video. I am excited, but also trepidatious. There's some concern. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I am trying to go into it with an open mind. I might be really pleasantly surprised, or I might absolutely despise it and this whole video will be a rant. Who knows? We'll find out together. Okay, so that's the plan. That's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go off and restart Quicksilver, and I'll be back here to let you know my thoughts after I get to the 25% mark. Here's what happened. Last night I got to the 10% mark, which is where I DNF'd the first time, and I felt all the same feelings that I did the first time that made me really want to put the book down and walk away. And actually that was even more intensified because reading it specifically for a video where it was going to be the only book in the entire video, I was reading much more closely and paying more attention to the details than I did the first time. So there were even more things that were irking me by the time I got to the 10% mark. Well, my initial plan was just to quickly, read through the first quarter so I could do the first update yesterday. I needed a break. I needed to walk away and calm myself down. I was getting worked up and annoyed. So I ended up taking a long break and then reading a little bit more before I went to bed. And then this morning read a couple more chapters, which is why I ended up a little bit past a quarter of the way through. Once again, I used my favorite technique to continue through a book that I otherwise would DNF when it is starting to bring out all of my inner rage, which is to read with a cuddly cat somewhere on my person, because they really bring down my blood pressure. So as you saw, Yoda lent herself to that purpose this morning and was purring cozily on my chest, which really helped me not throw my Kobo across the room. Speaking of Yoda and Chewy, my cats, I am literally the definition of obsessed with them. And because I'm so obsessed with them, I'm really focused on making sure that they stay as healthy as possible, live the most comfortable, safe, happy lives they can possibly live. And one of the ways that I achieve this is with today's video sponsor, Pretty Litter. I've talked about Pretty Litter on this channel before. I love Pretty Litter and my cats love it too. I am not exaggerating when I say that if I fill one litter box with Pretty Litter and their other litter boxes are full of another clumping litter, they will use the Pretty Litter every single time. It's actually wild. I think their favorite thing about Pretty Litter is how lightweight it is, up to 80% lighter than traditional clumping litter, which is also something I love about it because if you have cats, you know that carrying around bags of litter requires inhuman strength. You could even say fey strength to stay on theme. But I think my cats really love the lightweight silica gel crystals. They seem to really enjoy digging in it and covering everything up nice and securely, which is great to help camouflage the smell. But of course, my favorite thing about Pretty Litter as a worried cat mom is the health monitoring. As I mentioned last time I talked about Pretty Litter, Chewy had a blockage in his urinary tract when he was young, and that whole experience was a bit traumatizing for my husband and myself, but also for both of our cats. It was just a whole ordeal, and we have done everything over the years to try to make sure that never happens again, both with feeding them specific medicated food and going to the vet regularly. But the third and really important piece of that puzzle is using Pretty Litter, because Pretty Litter was developed by veterinarians to help monitor your cat's health. And it's really easy for you to check in on your cat's health because Pretty Litter changes color based on the pH of your cat's urine. Dark yellow or olive green is within the typical range, but it can also turn blue, orange, or red to indicate a variety of health conditions and keep you in the loop so you can bring your cat to the vet, get them checked out, and get any necessary treatment to keep them happy and healthy. The crystals are amazing at soaking up moisture, and that makes Pretty Litter such a low maintenance litter. Because it absorbs all that moisture, all you have to do is scoop the dehydrated poop and give the litter a bit of a stir and you're good to go. Pretty Litter is also 99.9% dust free, which is good for your lungs, but also for your kitty's tiny little lungs. Pretty Litter is also super convenient. You can have it delivered directly to your door, and one bag of Pretty Litter can last a whole month. You can get 20% off your first purchase plus a free cat toy using my code plantbride20 and the link in my description box or this QR code. That's plantbride20 for 20% off and a free cat toy with your first purchase of Pretty Litter. We all love Pretty Litter in this house, and I know you'll love them too, so give them a try, and thank you again to Pretty Litter for sponsoring this video. Okay, now let's talk about the first 11 and a half chapters of Quicksilver. Yes, I did stop halfway through a chapter. I couldn't do it anymore. I had to stop. So, where do I start? I'm going to start with a very sort of brief overview of positives and negatives in a larger sense, and then I'm going to get more into the nitty-gritty. So, starting with the positives, because there are fewer of them, I like The inklings of thematic content surrounding wealth inequality and poverty and hoarding of resources. Has that been explored much outside of the first couple chapters? No, but it feels like that's where we're going. So that's a positive for me. Okay. I also like... do I like anything else? Everlane, for the most part, she seems like a nice person. She's a side character. No, that's it. That's it for positives. Okay, moving on to negatives. Starting with an overview, I am disappointed in the writing, both the quality in general, but also the contradictions that keep coming up. It's very messy. There are lots of plot holes, or just we're being given information that is then contradicted in the next chapter, which makes it very hard to follow. Poorly edited and very melodramatic writing with some really awkward turns of phrase, similes, metaphors that don't make a lot of sense. Also, the characters, other than Everlane, who is a side character, are all very annoying, especially our protagonist and the male love interest. They are both insufferable assholes. I don't know how else to put it. They both suck. They're both very annoying, and their dialogue is cringy on a level that I'm not even sure I can fully express. I will try to read some quotes for you so you can understand, but I feel like the individual atoms in my body are cringing. Okay. Also, this book is obsessed with the heights of the characters, and by that I mean almost every single character, with the exception of, I think, one who has explicitly been described as short. Every other character, literally every character we've been introduced to, has been described as tall, and I would say 99% of them have been described as the tallest in any room, which you might pick up on already as being odd, because it's not possible for every single person to be the tallest in a room. That's not how that works. Our main character and her brother are described as being taller than almost anyone in any room. Then we meet Carrion, her ex, basically, who is, a head taller than everyone else. We meet her mentor in the Forge, who is a mountain of a man and a giant. Then we meet the male love interest, who is taller than any other man she's literally ever seen. Then we meet her male love interest's best friend, who is like 7 feet tall. I'm pretty sure she says at one point that he's 7 feet tall. It just goes on and on and on, and every character is taller than the last in a way that is starting to get absolutely comically ridiculous. But fine, so now she's with Faye and they're all super tall, but it's set up so that she can be, a super tall woman. Maybe she's like 6 feet or something, but she still manages to be teeny tiny next to the male love interest because he's 7 feet tall. So even though she's 6 feet tall, he's still towering over her. How convenient, because we couldn't possibly read about a pairing that is closer to being at each other's eye level, let alone a woman who is taller than a man, because that would bring all of society crumbling to its knees, apparently. That is a huge pet peeve of mine. I've talked about it so many times. As a tall woman myself, I find it a little offensive how hard authors work to make it clear that even their tall main characters are teeny tiny compared to anyone else, because we couldn't possibly find a woman who is genuinely tall and taller than others, especially taller than men, aspirational. Like I said, the main character is insufferable. So is the male love interest. They are both assholes. The main character, Saris, has that personality type that so many romantic leads in fantasy, or romantasy, I suppose, have, and especially in YA fantasy, where they are super sassy and sarcastic. Everything is a quip. Even in life or death moments, they are joking and flirting and quipping. And it's, I am a very sarcastic person, okay? I get it. I get the urge to quip, okay? But there is a time and a place, and when you are about to die is not the time. It drives me up the wall. I find it so irritating. It feels very forced, and it feels like authors are really trying to make you find the main character as funny as possible. Especially in this case, so often she will say something sarcastic or make a joke that is not funny, but then the author goes on to describe how every other character in the room bursts into laughter because it's the funniest thing they've ever heard in their life. And I'm just sitting there thinking, really? That is the joke that has them all? Have they never heard a joke before? Is this another difference between humans and fae? It's too much. And the male love interest just keeps saying the most ridiculous things. He is constantly making innuendos and commenting on things in a really weird way, and growling and snarling and picking our main character up like a sack of grain and tossing her onto beds in apparently a non-sexual way. It's a lot, okay? It's a lot. I'm not understanding the appeal. And of course, also, this whole thing, this situation is set up that our main character is really family-oriented. She loves her brother. Her brother is her whole world. And yet she's in a situation now where she is separated from her brother, and she's under the impression that her brother is going to be killed. And yet she seems to have zero urgency to get back to him and make sure he's okay. She's just chilling, frolicking, trading insults with this new fae male that she's met, and getting distracted by the color of his eyes and the sweat on his brow, and forgetting her brother exists for a ridiculous amount of time based on how this character has been built up to us and what she apparently values. She's also obviously the super special chosen one because she can do something that apparently no human has ever been able to do. She's also super gorgeous, beautiful, and the author makes sure to tell us repeatedly that she is very thin, just in case we had any other vision in our mind. She wants to make sure we know that she doesn't eat very much and she's very thin. The plot has been very slow. I guess I'm only 25% of the way through, but basically nothing has happened from the 10% mark, which is where I DNF'd the first time. Everything basically happens in that first 10%. And then until the 25% mark, they're wandering around in the halls and chatting and reading books and chatting some more and being sarcastic and eating. And that's about it. Oh, and putting pretty dresses on that she doesn't like because she's not like other girls and she doesn't like dresses, including a tight lacing scene for no reason whatsoever. Yeah, and then cringy dialogue, characters that I do not like, awkward writing. Yeah, that's about it. That's the overview. So I guess I'll get into specifics now. Because why not? And I have so many notes, so I'll try to not take a million years on every single one of these points because I don't want to. I only have so much will to live and I'm trying to hold on to it. But I will go through the majority of them because, as you can see, even just from the very first page, probably every page basically looks like this because I have so many complaints about every other sentence. So, starting with the first chapter, the author makes sure in literally the first full paragraph to tell us, I'll just read it to you. It was common knowledge in Zelveran City that to lie to a guardian meant death. I knew this in a first-hand, painful way that most other Zelverans did not. And then she goes on to describe a couple examples of where she's seen people being badly beaten or murdered in the street by guardians. And I thought that this was kind of weird because in one paragraph, from one sentence to the next, it's telling us that it's common knowledge that the guardians are brutal and that they will kill you for very little. But then in the next sentence telling us that she knows this in a way that most other people don't. So how is it both common knowledge, but most people in the city have not experienced as much of this firsthand as she has? Is it common knowledge just because they hear about it, but it doesn't actually happen that often? Because that seems weird. But I was like, okay, maybe it'll make sense somehow. Like she's just had extra bad luck. It's happened to her so many times firsthand. She's really been traumatized by this. But then she goes on to introduce us to so many other characters who have literally had this happen to them over and over and over and over and over again in their lives, where they've lost all of their siblings and their parents and every friend and every romantic interest they've ever had in their life violently in front of them from the guardians, which is starting to make me feel like the first paragraph lied to us, because seems like most people in Zelveran City have many firsthand experiences of how brutal the guardians are, and she's actually not that special in that case, in which case, why did the author tell us that? Why did she frame it that way if she was then going to continue to contradict herself in every following chapter? And there are many examples like this where the author will state something as if it's fact and then go on to disprove it repeatedly. And maybe it shouldn't matter that much, but I'm finding it very frustrating because I never know when to believe something that the author states, because she keeps changing her mind about what the facts are in this world and what people's experiences are and various characters' character traits and abilities. They keep changing as needed, chapter by chapter. It's like as soon as the author finishes writing a sentence, she completely forgets what she wrote and writes the next one with a blank slate and never goes back to check that things are in line or support each other. As a whole piece of a book. That's definitely not the only example. Just a few pages later, still in the first chapter, they were machines. In the barracks on the training floor, I wouldn't last 4 seconds against a fully trained guardian. And then later she says, yes, on the training floor, the asshole who'd caught me stealing the iron would have bested me in short order, but we weren't on the training floor. We were out in the hub and it was reckoning, and this poor bastard was trussed up like a feast day turkey in all that ceremonial armor. And this is used to set up that they are great fighters. And again, if, it were on equal footing and neither of them are wearing heavy armor, she wouldn't last 4 seconds against a guardian. But then later in, I think chapter 2, she takes on multiple guardians at once, not just sprinting away from a guardian who is wearing heavy armor, but fighting in close quarters with 3 guardians simultaneously, and she kills 2 of them and maims the 3rd. By herself. These are people who are apparently so well trained that she says herself earlier on that on equal footing, she wouldn't last against a single guardian for more than 4 seconds. Now it is her against 3 guardians at once, and she kills 2 and maims the 3rd. So what is the truth? Why are you setting it up like this and making them sound like these incredible fighters and like she has no chance, only to later point out that she is this amazing fighter who has been trained from a young age to specifically target weaknesses in their armor? And so you lied to me earlier on when you said you wouldn't last 4 seconds. It seems like you actually have these amazing skills. So what is the point of that? It frustrates me so much because the easy solution is just to not tell me that information. Just say everything else in this paragraph about how they're trained and how amazing they are without the fact that you wouldn't last 4 seconds against them. Just say like, this is all the training they have. They're a really formidable foe, but luckily I'm not wearing heavy armor, so I'm faster. I'm gonna run away now. And then later on, reveal the fact that she has this training and is also a great fighter. It wouldn't feel like I'm being betrayed and lied to and tricked by the book over and over again. Oh yeah, also, she's being strangled by a guardian, again on the first page, and she feels it's necessary to point out that he is handsome for no reason. We'll never see this guardian again. And this is also the first moment that we're realizing that she is in a dangerous situation, and you could describe him in any other way. You could say he's strong. You could say he's intimidating. You could say he's angry. You could say he's ferocious. I don't know. You could say literally anything, but she feels the need to say that he's handsome. Again, irrelevant. Also, there is a lot of really awkwardly shoehorned in exposition in the dialogue in the first couple chapters. I get it. I feel like world building in fantasy in the first couple chapters tends to always be a little intense because there's a lot to let us in on to understand the world. And usually there's a lot to tell us in fantasy. So I'm fine with that. But when the dialogue just becomes really awkward exposition where characters are telling other characters who have lived in this world their whole life information that they have known their whole life as if they don't know it so that we, the reader, can learn it, that is bad storytelling. That is info dumping, weird exposition. This does it over and over and over again. For example, the guardian is strangling her and says, name, age, ward. Spit it out, which would be fine because that's the information he's asking for. And that gives us some information. The information about wards, we have a feeling that maybe people have to only exist in certain places. But then he feels the need to add this, which is something that she would obviously know, seeing as she lives here, which is low-tier citizens aren't permitted in the hub. Like, she would know that. You don't have to tell her that. Again, that is the author trying to tell us this information, which we could figure out just by reading what's happening. When he finds out she's from the 3rd and he gets angry, we can infer that that means that people in the 3rd aren't supposed to be in the hub. You don't have to tell us this in such an awkward way. Also, the author really likes to give us very specific information that, again, later on will be contradicted when she doesn't have to do such a thing. So she tells us that the walls in this city that split all the different wards are 50 meters high. Then, as you might be able to guess from this first chapter being called The Climb, our main character is going to climb this 50-meter wall, which, you know, seems like that's going to be a difficult task, but fine, I can suspend disbelief. She lives here. She has had to climb the walls before. They are also crumbling from the wind, so there are spots where you can maybe take handholds. Fine, she's capable of climbing 50 meters of sheer rock wall. What I will not believe is what we later find out, which is that she climbs 50 feet in an undetermined amount of time, and then tells us specifically that she climbs the rest of the way to the top of the wall in under 2 minutes, which I did the math, is 114 feet in under 2 minutes. These walls are 11 and a half stories tall. Okay, that's the kind of height we're talking about. Under 2 minutes, she is climbing 114 feet. Maybe, under some circumstance, that could be humanly possible, but from my research, which I went down a rabbit hole, it's basically impossible, okay? That is 3 times faster than an advanced or expert rock climber could climb a similar amount at the top range of the estimate. That is ridiculously fast. And apparently she's not doing it with magic. So again, why are we being given these specifics of 50 meters high, she is now 50 feet up, she climbs the rest of the way in under 2 minutes. If she just didn't tell us exactly how high up she was, or exactly how tall the walls were, or exactly how many minutes she was doing it in, it would be much easier to suspend disbelief. It would still feel like a ridiculously difficult feat, but I wouldn't be able to go down a rabbit hole of research and do the math to calculate how many feet she's climbing per second. The book also makes sure to tell us on page 16 that our main character has dark hair and blue eyes, which aren't common in the Silver City, and he would remember her. Sure, it won't come up again. I'm sure it's just, the fact that she is uncommonly beautiful, as every main character is, and nothing else. Definitely not a hint for something to come. Oh yeah, also apparently she's famous, which we find out very early on as well. She is the Sarah's Fane. And if he knew he had the Sarah's Fane, he would lose his shit because she is the Sarah's Fane and she's very famous. Yeah, more intense exposition in dialogue between people who both already know all that information. Residents of the 3rd Ward are quarantined. Punishment for leaving the ward is, and then she takes over the exposition for us in her own mind for some reason. There was no punishment for leaving the 3rd. No one had ever done it before. Those unlucky enough to find themselves scraping out a living in the dirty back alleys and stinking side streets of my home usually died before they could even think about escape. Why is this exposition happening in your brain, and why are you telling each other things that you both already know about the world you live in? It's the only world you know. It's just lazy. It's lazy world building, okay? Oh yeah, all the Guardians wear gold armor, which, I'm not a metallurgist, but I'm pretty sure gold is one of the softer metals. Seems like a poor choice for armor. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's more about looks than it is about actual protection, but seems weird, but okay. Also, the main character started reminding me of Vis in The Will of the Many. If you've read that, I read it for a recent reading vlog, my fantasy reading vlog, and that main character is super overpowered, but also very full of himself and convinced that he is the best actor of all time. It feels like Saris has a similar personality. With a quick twist and a forward lunge, I grabbed the Guardian just below his knee, one of the only places he was unprotected by his heavy golden armor. The tears came in quick and hot, believable. I gave a solid performance, but then again, I'd had a lot of practice. It's like, how do you know you're giving a solid performance? You've just decided you did. It feels like someone else has to confirm that for you. And considering he continues to not believe you and chase you after this, it feels like maybe it wasn't a solid performance, but it just kind of reinforces the vibe I'm getting from her early on, which again was similar to the vibe I got from Vis in The Will of the Many, which is just a huge amount of arrogance and narcissism going on with the main character. Apparently the gold is formed by a chainmail that is impenetrable by blade or magic. No explanation as to how that's possible. It just is a fact, apparently. But again, I feel like I can't trust this book because it keeps telling me stuff and then changing the rules later. So you're saying it's impenetrable by blade or magic, but I wouldn't be surprised if later you can easily use magic and or a blade to penetrate it, because again, nothing is set in stone in this world. Phrases like this, which are just so redundant. The Guardian's bellow bounced around the cobbled courtyard, his command echoing loudly. Bellow, meaning loud, bounced around the cobbled courtyard means that it's echoing, and then you follow it up by telling us his command echoing loudly. Like, we got that it was loud and that it was echoing by the first part of the sentence. You didn't have to say it again. Did you think we weren't smart enough to understand the first part of the sentence? In which case, just skip that part and just say his command echoed loudly in the courtyard. Sometimes more is not better, you know? Anyway, I'll try to go a bit faster and just try to point out the most important things, but that first chapter had a lot to drive me up the wall. but not a 50-meter wall and not in under 2 minutes. She also comes across as a petulant child in the second chapter and is very dismissive of her mentor's rational concerns. And also we learn that she is a very special person, not just because she's so pretty and fast and skinny, but also because she is like the only human ever with magic. She's one of a kind in more ways than one. It continues to be very melodramatic. For example, this little passage, I tore my arm free, my jaw working, 1,000 cold, hard insults clambering over one another, competing to be first out of my mouth. Okay, girl, calm down. That again, she's very famous and everyone cares a lot about everything she does. If she shows up somewhere, that is national news. If she has sex with someone, that is going to be headline news for months and months and months because it is that relevant to everyone around her who she fucks. The positive here is that she's not a barely 18-year-old virgin who's about to fall into insta-lust with a non-human creature who is a millennia old, but this is just over the top. Here is a little example. A dozen heads swung in my direction as I entered, a dozen pairs of eyes going wide when they observed who had just walked in. Hayden was a daily visitor here, but I only ventured across the tavern's threshold when I'd had a bad day. I came here to blow off steam, to fight. A wild array of outrageous things was whispered about me behind the backs of sunburned hands here, that a man might either get lucky or be beaten unconscious depending on my mood when I sat my ass down at the bar. Then she meets up with the only person to have ever made her scream out of pleasure instead of frustration. And lots of examples of how she is uncommonly badass. You know, a weapon had to be considerably shinier and a whole lot sharper to make me blink. And all this emphasis is not my own. These words are italicized. They are meant to be emphasized. And it just reinforces how cringy this writing is. Like I said, everyone really cares about her sex life. The man was capable of anything. His fingers were lighter than the dawn breeze. He'd talked me out of my underwear, perhaps the greatest heist ever performed in Zelvarin, and people hadn't stopped talking about that for months. Why do people care this much? These people are suffering. They get 6 ounces of water a day per person. They are starving. They are being murdered regularly, losing all their loved ones, living in extreme poverty. And the most important thing to them, the thing that they want to talk about for months and months on end, is the fact that 2 random people who were also poverty-stricken once, really? I'm supposed to think they care that much about this person? And it would be one thing if this was set up as a world that was super prudish and like sex negative and slut shaming, because in that case I'd be like, okay, well maybe they're just gossiping because she's a woman who is having sex outside of the bonds of marriage, which a lot of fantasies, because they tend to have a bit of a historical inspired setting, do have misogynistic rules like that about women not being allowed to be sexually liberated. But in this case, there's literally zero indication that anyone cares from a slut-shaming perspective. It seems like they're just really interested in her and her life because she is that special and important. When I was little, Elroy had been a giant of a man, a legend amongst even the most dangerous criminals that ran the Third, taller than most, broad, his back muscles straining beneath his sweat-stained shirt. So he is taller than most and broad. That's Elroy. Okay, great. Like I said, she and Hayden are described as taller than most people in any room. Then we get to introduce Carrion, her ex/fuck buddy, and he is taller than anyone in any room by at least a foot. Are you starting to sense a pattern? Because it seems like hyperbole for effect is more important than actually telling a story that I can follow and know what these different characters look like and how tall they are. It's not that important, but if you're gonna go to the effort of telling me, at least tell me in a way that I can actually understand. Oh yeah, also my prediction from the second chapter is that somehow her sunny, affable little brother who everyone loves is going to be in mortal peril at some point, or going to be just outright killed, because that will be her motivation for the rest of the story for whatever she has to do. Seems pretty obvious that that's being set up, but you know, maybe I'll be shocked and surprised by the direction the book goes in. Of course, Carrion has a cute little ironic nickname for her because she is an arrogant asshole and describes herself as an ice princess, but he calls her Sunshine. Isn't that so ironic and funny? Because she's like not sunshiny, because she's actually very negative all the time and mean to everyone. But she's Sunshine. Isn't that funny? The author has to be a fan of Drag Race or watch a lot of queer media, because our main character in her mind says the gall, the nerve, the out and out audacity. She also is the horniest main character I have read about in a while. In this first conversation with Carrion, which is supposed to be about the fact that he beat her brother to shit, she just keeps thinking about them having sex. She keeps having these vivid flashbacks. For example, Carrion's eyes traveled down my body, his smile broadening when they skimmed over my hips, and the memory of his tongue skimming over my hips slammed into me out of nowhere, drawing a wave of heat to my cheeks. Holy martyrs, I did my level best to block the other memories that were trying to shove their way into the forefront of my mind. Carrion wanted his off-the-cuff comment to remind me of how long he spent working with his tongue between my thighs. He wanted me to recall just how long he'd held back his own pleasure, like it was his God's cursed job, while he teased out mine. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Like, okay, girl, you're spending a lot of time thinking about it. Seems like maybe you should just f again. Seems like he's good in bed. Why are you so against getting your rocks off? Like, just go for it. And if you really don't care, why are you thinking about it so much? Methinks the lady protests too much. Sorry, I just laughed because I read a note that I wrote, which is just, I think she's dumb. Because she's having this back and forth where she thinks it's important to not let Carrion know that she stole this gold gauntlet, because if he knows, then he's gonna take it from her and that would be dangerous. So she's like, well, yeah, I heard that someone stole it. Okay, fine, I guess someone stole it, but maybe they stole it for a good reason. And then he very easily baits her into revealing that it was actually her. You think I'd give it to you? Too late, I realized I'd given myself away. Like, okay, apparently she is the smartest, most talented thief, instills awe and fear in everyone she comes across, is super well known and badass, and yet she is tricked into revealing that it was her so easily. Okay. The rebels my mother had helped before her death had done more than hide in our attic. They had trained me, taught me how to steal, how to survive, how to fight. And now I fought like hell's own fury made flesh. He rained down blows with his blade, calculated and measured. Each of his moves was a question to which I had an answer. Sorry, it's just so cringy. It's so melodramatic. The air came alive with the sound of crashing steel. He was a whirlwind, his movements lithe and graceful. Every time his blade scythed down toward my head, I expected the world to go black. But somehow it didn't. Somehow I managed to bring the sword I'd taken up in time. Somehow I held my own. And just when he was getting comfortable, when this predator thought he'd finally gotten a read on my capabilities as a fighter, I stopped holding back. Like, why are you in your own internal monologue trying to bury the lead? His eyes went wide when he saw it happen, when I loosened in my stance and brought the blade up to guard my face, the second when I bared my teeth and came for him. He spoke then, at last, just one word. Shit. Oh God, it's so bad. So then in the next chapter, we meet the first character who is not explicitly described as one of, if not the tallest person in any room. We meet a character who is described as dainty and small. So they do exist, apparently, in this world. The fourth chapter has a lot more world building and some development of the potential themes to do with wealth inequality, hoarding resources, etc. There is a lot of cringiness and melodramatic writing still, but it's not quite as overwhelming. We do get a couple lines like, and I was being marched to my death. Funny how your own impending demise will rob a girl of her desire to take in the scenery. But it definitely won't rob you of your desire to make a joke or a sarcastic quip about not taking time to take in the scenery. So at least we can all be thankful for that. She gives long monologues about how terrible it is to live in poverty, which cool, but also maybe not the time and place. Also not sure why she thinks that the captain of the guard is gonna care. But you know, that's fine. And then we get to chapter 5. I feel like the world building is confusing because we actually haven't heard much about the technology. All we know is that they have forges for metal, but it seems like they maybe don't have any advanced technology at all, no electricity even. But then at the start of chapter 5, she talks about learning that cows were slaughtered by being hit in the forehead with a piercing bolt, taking them by surprise. And I'm pretty sure bolt guns in slaughterhouses is a pretty advanced technology. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that this is the kind of thing that would be invented by people who also haven't invented things like guns. Seems weird and incongruous with the general world building that we're getting, which is seemingly pre-industrialization, except for when it comes to factory farms. There's a lot of snarling also. Let's find out how many times people snarl. He snarled, I snarled back. The captain snarled, I snarled. Snarling when I tried to pull myself free. Pulled back into a snarl. Snarling beasts. Gnashed and snarled. Snarling at the guards. But then he'd snarl under his breath. My stomach audibly snarled. etc., etc., etc. There are 9 pages worth of search results for snarl. So if that gives you an idea. So the end of this chapter, chapter 5, is where I DNF'd the first time. So this is very dramatic. I won't give any spoilers, but we don't know if our main character will survive. This is very harrowing. Then someone appears out of seemingly nowhere, and she thinks, death. The bastard had come to claim me in person. Emerging from the silver, the huge figure rose up from the pool as if ascending from the very depths of hell itself. Broad shoulders, wet, shoulder-length black hair, tall, taller than any other man I'd ever seen. Seriously? Do I believe you that this is actually the tallest man you've ever seen? Because every man we've met in this story has been the tallest. So I don't believe you anymore. Is this genuinely the tallest man you've ever seen? Ridiculous. Anyways, his eyes shone an iridescent shimmering green, the pupil of the right eye rimmed by the same shiny metallic silver that ran in ribbons from the black leather armor that covered his chest and arms. He towered over me, his lips pulled back into a snarl, revealing gleaming white teeth and sharp canines. Like, okay, oh God. And she thinks, I had never for one moment imagined his voice might also be the stroke of velvet in the ever-encroaching darkness. Because of course he has a sexy, velvety voice. How could he not? And then later on, again, it's still in her internal monologue. Of course death was beautiful. How else would anyone choose to go with him without putting up a fight? Even though he scowled at me, his dark brows tugging together to form a dark, unhappy line, he was still the most savagely beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Who wants to guess that this is the love interest, right? It's obvious, right? So anyway, that's where I DNF'd the first time at the end of that chapter, because that line, tall, taller than any man I'd ever seen, and then describing his velvety voice and him being savagely beautiful, I was just like, oh God, make it end. Jesus Christ. But again, y'all wanted me to read it, so I have continued past that point. The point of no return. She's very not like other girls. She does not like dresses. That comes up over and over again. There are lines about looking down to see her feet, and then she gets mad because she can't see her feet because she's wearing a dress. She's like, I look down to where my feet should be, but I can't see them because I'm wearing a stupid ass dress. Like, she's just mad all the time about the fact that dresses exist and she is wearing them. And it comes up multiple times as well that of course she looks stunning in the dresses. Like there's one red dress that she's wearing that she's like, this dress would make any man fall to his knees, but I still hate it because I'm not like other girls and I don't like dresses. I wear pants. Like, okay girl, we get it. I don't do dresses, Everlane. What do you mean? She looked genuinely confused. I wear pants, shirts, things I can move easily in so I can run and climb and, in her own internal monologue, kill people. I was numb as I let Everlane shake me into the dress. Gown was a more appropriate name for it, really. You look like a dream, Everlane announced when she was done jiggling and poking me, tugging on corset stays so hard I thought I might pass out. Also that, corset stays? A stay and a corset are not the same thing. If you're gonna specifically talk about stays and or corsets in your book, maybe spend 2 milliseconds Googling them and realizing that they are not the same thing. And nothing is a corset stay. You look like a dream. And yet I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare, I added dryly. Because again, she hates dresses. She is not like other girls. And then later, Everlane points out, you have beautiful hair. Long hair is a sign of highborn status in Fae women. Others will be jealous of your dark coloring too. Dark hair is a royal trait among the Evalian Fae. I wonder if that will be relevant later. Of course, because they are Fae, they are males, not men, and they reinforce that I'm not a man, I'm a Fae male. Okay, dude. Calm down. He was frighteningly tall. This is not even the same character. This is a different man, and he is frighteningly tall, later described as 7 feet tall. So again, every character is even taller than the last. I'm waiting for the character who's going to be taller than a tower, literal giants. That must be where we're going next. Where does it end? She is told, you have no idea how important you are. Not just famous and hot and skinny and good at climbing walls and fighting, also very important. There's a lot of world building. There's a lot of stuff that now at least our main character doesn't know it. So her being told everything in detail feels a little bit more realistic because she doesn't know. So she's also learning and we're learning with her. So then Kingfisher, our love interest, shows up in this court full of hundreds of fae. And it's shocking that he is there. And we get this like really dramatic call out of people yelling from all around the room. And it's living curse, bane of the Gillothry, Black Knight, Kingfisher, Kingfisher, Kingfisher. The name Kingfisher echoed throughout the hall, spoken with a mix of reverence and fear. He lives! He's returned! Mercy, kill him, banish him, protect Evelia from the scourge. Kingfisher, 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 send him to his grave. It's very dramatic. Sorry. Sorry. It's so funny. It's so cringy. Okay, so then different characters are kind of arguing and Kingfisher hasn't said anything yet, but then sort of from the distance where he's like leaning against a wall dramatically, he looks up and goes, "Stop bickering." And it's in italics just to drive home the tone, I guess. And then in Saris's internal monologue, a thrill of energy rocketed up my spine at these two words. Kingfisher's voice was rough and pained, but it was also electricity. It made every hair on my body stand to attention. It reads like a parody. Am I wrong? Tell me if I'm wrong. It reads like a parody to me. It's like an SNL sketch of a romantasy book. But at least, as dramatic as this is being, he's not immediately all over her and obsessed with her and like staring at her constantly and, you know, following her around. He spared her the briefest of glances and then looked away. I was invisible, inconsequential. Neither Renfist nor Kingfisher said a word to me as they turned and left. And my annotation was just good. Because I feel like I am so sick, especially when the main character is described as being unremarkable in their appearance, and then the male love interest, who is some sort of Adonis, the hottest man to have literally ever been forged, is obsessed with her immediately and super attracted to her and in love with her. At least in this case, I mean, she is described as being exceptionally beautiful, but he just does not give a shit. He like barely notices she's there, which is, I feel like, humbling for her because she has enough narcissism to power an entire city. And then of course, to just keep on reinforcing that vibe we're getting that she's extra special and there's something we're gonna learn about her background. Why does she look so different? Why does she have traits of the royal fae? A deep voice murmurs, she must have a drop of fae blood. Enough to stop Solace from burning off her hands, but not enough to matter. Oh, she must have a drop of fae blood? I wonder if that'll come up again. There's a lot of bringing up people's genitalia in random conversation as well, I guess to be edgy. For example, Everlane talking to Kingfisher. If you're trying to shock me by mentioning random parts of male anatomy, then you're out of luck, the blonde-haired female snapped. I've seen Ren's balls. I've seen yours too. I've seen everything, she said, pointedly glowering at Kingfisher's crotch. So I know exactly where to aim my knee if you continue to test me. And this is because Kingfisher dryly said, I assume he's still scrubbing his balls. Why? A little bit of bickering later, we get, sounds to me like you're the one I should be watching out for, Darlene Lane. You're the one who just threatened to knee me in the Ooh, edgy. They're talking about their and their balls. She notices that he has a sword on his back, and for some reason that's shocking to her, even though we've established that she only wears pants because she has to be ready to kill people and knows how to use a sword. We also watched her kill multiple people already, but she's shocked that anyone would walk around with a sword on their back. Gods, he did have a sword strapped to his back. I hadn't noticed right away. Only the sleek black hilt was visible over Kingfisher's shoulder. Out of nowhere, his eyes flickered to me. Also that, flickered to me. Flicked to me? It's gotta be flicked to me. Flickered is like lights flickering. Eyes, you don't flicker in different directions. That's not how that works. Didn't this also happen in One Dark Window? What is with romantasy and eyes flickering and using that to mean something it doesn't mean? That's not what flickering means. Anyways, his eyes flickered to me, the first time he'd even acknowledged that I was there. And again, the library grew yet another degree darker. Was he doing that? It's rude to stare at a male's hardware, he said stiffly. Get it? Hardware, it's his sword, but they've been talking about and balls. She's apparently the funniest person ever. She's so witty. And it's constantly people laughing at things she says that are not funny. She's, reacting to the fact that he has a sword. And she's like, don't worry, I wasn't planning on stealing it. It isn't very impressive. Looks more like a toothpick to me. Oh my God, burn. His sword is a toothpick. Everlane stifled a bark of laughter with the back of her hand because it's that funny. Oh ho ho. I think that one might have drawn blood. Did it draw blood though? You described his sword as a toothpick. I'm sure that's been done before. That can't be the first time anyone's made that joke, right? And then he gets really mad because this sword has slain thousands, he seethed. I wouldn't have thought that was anything to brag about, I replied. You should probably get it looked at. Ha! Remphis stuffed his fist into his mouth, biting down on his knuckles as he tried to swallow down his laughter. Like, they're actually acting like 13-year-olds. Oh, and then we learn another tidbit of information that is definitely not relevant or connected to anything else we've learned, and we should probably just forget it immediately because it's definitely not going to come up later. Not to mention the fact that there are still rumors floating around that the Dianthus, I don't know, whatever. The Dianthus heir is in Zelverin somewhere. An heir of a Fey line is somewhere in Zelverin? And we learned that our main character is coloring unlike anyone else in Zelverin, and the coloring is actually the same as this specific line of royal Fae, and she maybe possibly has a drop of Fae blood considering what she did that humans aren't supposed to be able to do. Definitely not connected though. Totally not relevant or important at all. Not gonna come up again, I'm sure. It is reinforced to us that while our main character is very tall amongst humans, don't forget, she's tall and skinny. She has short legs compared to all these really tall Fae. She just has tiny legs. She can't keep up. He wasn't slowing his pace for anyone. Not for his injured friend, not for the king's daughter, and certainly not for me, the only human in the group, whose legs were considerably shorter than everyone else's. I was on the verge of breaking into a jog just to keep the three of them in sight. Oh no, she's so tiny. Her legs are so short. Devastating. It's established from the first chapter and the second chapter that Saris is completely reckless. She rushes into things, she makes snap decisions, even if they're dangerous, even if they put everyone she loves at risk. She has an argument with her mentor about it in the second chapter, that he is disappointed in her, that she would put them all at risk by making such a reckless choice. But now that she knows that her brother, who's apparently the most important person to her in her life, is either already dead or about to be, and then learns a way that she could get home to make sure he's okay or save him or at least avenge him. All of a sudden she's not reckless and she really cares about thinking things through and understanding all the variables before she makes a decision. I was going to get back to my brother, but I couldn't rush into this. Rushing something so dangerous that I had no understanding of whatsoever would undoubtedly mean death or at the very least serious trouble. Okay, but a few chapters ago you did not care. And you put your brother's life at risk, and apparently that was totally fine and totally within your character, but now you're someone who really thinks things through and doesn't act on instinct or do anything reckless. Okay, makes sense. Totally consistent with your characterization so far. I was an accomplished fighter. I knew how to put a guardian on his ass in 3 seconds flat. What? You literally said at the start that in under 4 seconds, a guardian would take you out, that you wouldn't stand a chance. 4 seconds, they would have you out of the fight. And now you're saying that you're an accomplished fighter and you knew how to put a guardian on his ass in 3 seconds flat. Which one is it? Stop lying to me in your own thoughts. Are you lying to yourself in your own thoughts? I hate it. I hate it so much. I could scale 40-foot high walls. Why are you saying 40-foot high walls when in the beginning you said it was 50 meters high? A 50-meter high walls is way more impressive than a 40-foot wall. Do you know how much of a difference there is between a foot and a meter? It's a significant difference. Also, of course, he already has a special nickname for her because she's so special. Oshalith, which is a type of butterfly that only lives for a short time because, she's human and she has a very short lifespan and he's making fun of her for her species that, she had no say in because she just exists. Our ancestors were cursed millennia ago. As a result, we ended up with these, he said, gesturing to his canines. We used them to drink your kind dry. We drained you by the millions before the blood curse was lifted. This was long before our time, of course, but the Fey line still bears the marks of its past. We might not need blood to maintain our immortality anymore, but by the gods do we still have the teeth for it. Our dirty little secret. Our awful, horrible shame. You're telling me that the lore in this world is that Fae started as vampires? Like I said, they keep talking about each other's genitalia randomly in conversation because they're edgy like that. Because I planned on riling him, annoying him, baiting him the same way he baited me with his constant OSHA name-calling and his open derision. Screw him. Kingfisher dropped his chest protector to the floor. Also, there's a lot of scenes, for some reason, of Kingfisher dressing in full armor, but then not wanting to wear his armor, so like stripping one piece at a time while they're having aggressive, confrontational conversations back and forth. I braced against the workbench and said, Elroy swears that a man will lie about the size of his every time a woman asks him. Kingfisher stilled. Are you asking me how big my is, Osha? I don't care how big it is. I care about the way you answer. A slow, terrifying smirk spread across his face. It's big enough to make you scream and then some. See? I jabbed a finger at him. You're not going to be honest. He looked around the forge, feigning confusion. I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I understand your meaning. Ask a man how big his dick is and he'll show you that he's full of shit. Maybe, but I'm not a man. I'm a fey male. He paused. And maybe I'm just well endowed. Or maybe you're just wasting my time and we should get on with whatever you're going to attempt to teach me here, I snapped. Kingfisher's hands moved to the back of his neck. It took him all of 4 seconds to unfasten his gorget and slide the silver plate free. Maybe the issue is that you asked me a question about my like a hungry little bitch in heat, and didn't ask me something that mattered. Are you kidding me? Maybe the issue is that you asked me a question about my like a hungry little bitch in heat? Is this supposed to, did I just get tricked into reading erotica? Is that what this is? What the is happening right now? There is a lot about smelling too that starts up at around this point, and I hate when characters talk nonstop about how everyone smells. It gives me the ick. At first I didn't feel it. I was too aware of his proximity and the wild array of different scents that kept rolling off of him and slamming into me. Wood and leather and spices and something green and faint musk and good lord. The next chapter is literally named Swallow, and it starts with a tight lacing scene because of course we can't have a world where anyone wears a corset without reinforcing the misconception that corsets were always tight-laced and always torture devices that were all about making your waist as tiny as possible and not at all about being supportive undergarments to help hold up the weight of giant gowns. Anyways, tight lacing scene about how she's gonna have her ribs cracked by this corset. Can I please wear some pants? We've been over this. You're too pretty to wear pants. I wish I was making this up, but this is real, actual dialogue. She'd squawked when he'd thrown me unceremoniously down on the bed and snarled, "Bad human," at me. You have to be kidding. It has to be a parody, right? I am losing my mind. Admittedly, I do enjoy when a female kneels for me, but in this particular case, why is Kingfisher so lecherous and weird and creepy and gross? You like it? He purred. Like, no, we don't like it. Please stop. She mentions that his lip is bleeding everywhere again, and his tongue darted out between his lips, his blood staining the very tip of it, and I found myself being flashed by a pair of wickedly sharp canines. The sight of them sent a thrill of panic-tinged intrigue through me. Heat rose up from the pit of my stomach, my blood rushing to my cheeks. Kingfisher's gaze snapped up, singling in on mine. Careful, human. We Fae have an excellent sense of smell. You'd be amazed what we can scent floating on the air. Ew. Listen, no body shame, no sex shame. Arousal has a scent, and when you are very close and personal with someone you are having sex with, you will probably smell their arousal. That is normal. Sitting across the room from someone and saying, careful, human, you'd be amazed at what we can scent floating in the air to imply that you can immediately smell their arousal from across the room is gross. And also, crossing so many boundaries. These people have not established that they have that kind of relationship, and the fact that he keeps pushing the boundaries and making things sexual and weird is very uncomfortable. It is not appealing. I feel like an alien sometimes when I read books like this because I'm like, is this what other people find hot? Am I just like the weird outlier who doesn't understand how this is appealing whatsoever? I've seen a lot of people say that this kind of thing would not be appealing in real life, but it is in fantasy. I don't find it appealing in fantasy either. It is gross and weird, okay? He later says, I'm also a fan of aggressive foreplay. No one asked. It makes me think of that episode of IT Crowd where Roy is so sure that women only like bastards, and so he starts acting like a total asshole and just saying things that don't make sense and being as rude as humanly possible to try to prove that women like bastards.
I hate to generalize, you know that, but all women just want bastards.
Do you always wear shades?
Always. They help me hide the fact I'm always lying to women.
She is choking, literally choking, and struggling to breathe. She could die. And he just is watching her, entertained. Kingfisher leans forward, his tongue running over his teeth again. He smiled suggestively as he said, swallow. She's literally choking. And instead of helping, you decide this is the moment for sexual innuendo? Really? Again, this is supposed to be appealing. This is supposed to be the man that we're interested in. This is supposed to be sexy. The first 25% is just really driving home the cringy melodramatic writing and just the inconsistencies. The inconsistencies in the character development, in the plot, in the world building. We are constantly told things that are then contradicted immediately after, or many chapters after. There's even another example I'll get to later of the fact that she has never seen snow before. It doesn't snow where she's from, but it snows where she is now. And she's told by Everlane that it snows every day at the Winter Palace. They see snow every single day. And then later on, after she's been there for several days, Everlane mentions it's going to snow later, and she gets excited because she's going to see snow for the first time. She's going to see snow falling, and she's never seen it before. And I'm like, you just told us a couple chapters ago that it snows here every single day, at least once a day. I went back to check. She specifically says it snows at least once a day. She's now been here for multiple days, and you're telling me she still hasn't seen snow. Why are you even giving us this kind of information if you're then going to contradict it later? Just say it snows a lot, or it's snowy here, or whatever, and then later on, this is the first time it's snowing. If you want that to be a big plot point, that she's excited to see snow for the first time, and it's not gonna be on the first day she's there, then don't tell us that it snows at least once a day. It's not like it's a real world that you have to accommodate inconveniences. You're making this up. You can literally make it be whatever you want. That is the power of fiction. Oh, also he's like a literal shadow daddy. Is this where the shadow daddy thing came from? Like he walks around in tendrils of darkness, follow in his wake. Is he the blueprint for the shadow daddy? Or is he just yet another in a long line of daddies of the shadow? I'm getting into some spoilers now, so you might want to skip this section if you don't want spoilers. I thought this was pretty obvious, but it's treated like a spoiler in the story or a shocking reveal. So spoilers for the first 27% of Quicksilver coming up. We find out that Everlane and Kingfisher are siblings, which is apparently supposed to be shocking. Seemed pretty clear to me by the way they were bickering and the way they talked and looked at each other that they were siblings, but fine. "You're my brother," Everlane hissed, "though I sometimes wish you weren't." Kingfisher jerked back as if she'd struck him. Several pages later, start of the next chapter, in the first paragraph, we get, "I wanted to ask her about what she'd said back in the hallway yesterday. She'd called Kingfisher her brother, and not in the same way Kingfisher and Remfist called each other brother, like warriors who'd fought alongside each other. She'd meant it in a more literal sense, as if she and the evil bastard shared blood." And I'm like, I'm pretty sure she meant it literally, like, they're siblings. Either the author thinks the reader is dumb as a brick and needs that spelled out, or Saris is just dumb as a brick. And either way, I'm losing patience. Also, it took her a million years to figure out that the filaments that marked his jade iris were actually remnants of Quicksilver. I feel like we all figured that out the moment that he showed up out of a pool of liquid silver and had silver roiling around in his eye, that maybe that was connected. But then especially when we found out that the silver can infest you and make you lose your mind, that maybe the Quicksilver goes into your body somehow, and you know, like that would be why his eye has silver in it. But again, she's like shocked when she realizes it. His eye, that was his lasting reminder? It had to be. The filaments that marked his jade iris were actually remnants of Quicksilver. Gods, it was inside him, always there, always whispering in his ear, pushing him toward madness. The relic really was the only thing keeping him sane. Like, yeah, obviously that's the Quicksilver. Can I petition a different MC to replace Saris? One with at least 2 brain cells to rub together, because my God, she is slow. She then goes ahead and says that it was obviously very easy to know that they are only half siblings and that her dad is not also Kingfisher's dad, because illegitimate or not, no father would hate their own blood the way Belicon hates Fisher, which I beg to differ. Lots of people hate their own blood, a whole lot, okay? So that is Quicksilver so far. That's the first 25%. I don't know if you can tell, I've been talking for like 2 hours, not having a great time. This is terrible. It's so poorly written. What is happening? Why? How does this have so many 5-star ratings? Make it make sense. Oh my God, horrifying. But like I said, I have already invested so much time into this. I read the first 10% twice, so I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna read to the 50% mark. It might take me a little longer than I initially planned based on how excruciating this is and having to take breaks for my own mental well-being. But yeah, gonna read to 50% and share my thoughts when I get there. I hope you're enjoying my torture because it is painful. Okay, see you later. taken many hours with many breaks, but I made it to the 50% mark, and it's 1:20 in the morning. So here we go, the second quarter of Quicksilver, from halfway through chapter 12 to about halfway through chapter, what am I on, 20, I guess? Like I said in the first update, I stopped halfway through chapter 12 because I just needed a break. And when I came back to it, literally the next page made me want to stop all over again. On the very next page, we're just being reminded yet again that this 24-year-old woman and this man who is like 1,800 years old are just children. We get her being mad that he keeps calling her human and OSHA, and she says, you know, I have a name, it's Saris, my name, call me that, or nothing at all. He casts an amused look over his shoulder, his lips parting a fraction, exposing the briefest glimpse of teeth. Nothing at all? I like the sound of that. Come here and look at this. Nothing at all. I suppose I walked right into that one. And she's just constantly reinforcing how stupid she is, like trying to touch things that just came out of a blazing fire with her bare hands, after apparently having years of experience working in a forge. And then we get a paragraph so melodramatic that I almost gave up for good. It was the first real full smile I'd seen from him, and it was terrifying. Not because of how evil it made him look. Far from it. He looked so much younger than he did when he was scowling. He looked happy, and that was what really with me. It was easy hating Kingfisher when he was being a bastard, but in this moment he appeared very unbastard-like, and that was confusing. Okay, girl, you have a crush. You're 24. I feel like you should understand when you have a crush. It's really not that hard to identify. Okay, and then later in chapter 12, Saris does the literal only thing that could endear her to me at all in this whole story, which is that she stops Kingfisher from murdering an innocent creature and decides to take it in and make it her pet. She adopts a fox that she names Onyx, and you can really tell how much I dislike this character because her having compassion for an animal and adopting it made me like her maybe 0.2% more. That's how little this is moving the needle for me because I despise her as a character so deeply. Finally, a use for all that ridiculous material. Such a pretty little doll in her pretty little dress, aren't you? Hey, I don't want to wear this, I snapped, plucking at the dress because she's not like other girls. What was I wearing when you found me? A whole lot of blood, Fisher pondered, frowned. Wait, I seem to recall your intestines may have been part of your ensemble. Pants and a shirt, I said dryly, and a pair of boots with really good soles. Do you have any idea what those boots cost me? Let me guess. Your virginity. Fuck you, Fisher. Sure, he smirked, but I'm afraid I don't have any new boots to trade you for your time. Like, come on. Do you know what these boots cost me? What? Your virginity? He's 1,800 years old. Once again, we're getting a little bit of propaganda against corsets. She drew in a full, deep breath for the first time in 6 hours and almost wept at the rush of air flooding her lungs. Like, okay. My head shot up. Kingfisher had his back to me. Oh, for the love of all the gods, he was pulling his shirt over his god's cursed head. Has she never seen a man's torso before? Apparently, her sex life is so intriguing to her entire ward of starving, poverty-stricken people that they'll talk about the last person she f***ed for 4 months straight, but she's totally head over heels and like shocked by a man's bare back. The human body is a beautiful thing. Fae bodies don't exist, but I'm sure if they were real, they would also be a beautiful thing. But like, get your shit together, girl. You are 24 years old. This is embarrassing for everyone. I'm just a spectator and I'm embarrassed for you. It's also so weird. I mean, I guess the Fae are very old, so maybe the point is supposed to be that she seemed confident and very adult and capable. That might be a stretch, but whatever. Back in Zilvarin, but now that she's amongst Fae and she's 24 compared to their 1,000+ years, that she seems like a child. But if that's the vibe we're going for, then I need them to not have a sexual relationship because that's just fucking weird. The age gap is ridiculous, obviously, between 24 and 1,800, but at least if they're both fully grown adults of their species, maybe it's slightly less creepy. But the fact that she is acting like a child and he keeps treating her like a child is making it creepier. Oh yeah. I forgot. There's just like a whole page of her simpering over him, and it gets more and more dramatic the longer it goes on. Gods, he was a sight to behold. Every line of him was art. With his full mouth and the faint shadow of stubble marking his jaw, his fascinating eyes, and all of his midnight black hair, it was hard not to look at him and ache. I had grown up in a pit of misery where people died more often than they lived. I hadn't seen many beautiful things in my short life, but of all the beautiful things I had seen, Fisher was the most beautiful of all. It would have been wrong to think of the men I'd encountered back in Silverian in that way. Some of them had been attractive. Some of them had even been hot enough to make my toes curl. But Fisher was the epitome of everything that was strong and male and powerful. He was so much more than anything I'd experienced before. He was beautiful. Looking at him made me feel like I couldn't catch my breath. Like it just doesn't end. It goes on and on and on. He was so goddamned big. Everyone apparently has a height kink, and I do not understand. The way he was looking at me, there was nothing friendly about it. Kingfisher and I weren't friends. At best, we were loose allies who irritated the hell out of each other. So why then was he looking at me right now like I was an ally he'd like to f***? I wonder why. Why do you think, Saris? Do you think maybe he wants to f*** you? Good lord, you are 24. You have had sex at least once that we can verify. Maybe he's looking at you like he wants to f*** because he wants to f***. Seems like you are literally incapable of rubbing your two brain cells together when he is in the room, so maybe you should just and get it out of your system so you can actually do what you came here to do and get back to your brother and save his life. Unless you forgot he existed, because I don't think he's come up for chapters at this point. Just saying. I swallowed, a wave of nausea making my mouth sweat. Is that a thing? Mouths sweating? No, thank you. His other hand moved from my chest, sliding down, around my waist, settling in the small of my back. His thighs drew together, pinning me by the hips between them. Panic. Panic, panic, panic. Girl, either f*** or just end it. Like, it's really not, why are you panicking? You don't need to panic. You could actually just have sex if you want to. Clearly you do. Like, I don't understand. This is the thing that I really don't understand about so many books that do the enemies to lovers thing, because not only do they not actually feel like enemies and also never feel like they're actual lovers, it's always just lust. But it also, there's so much tension and there's so much will they, won't they, but like we always know they will and they both want to from the beginning. Every single time you can tell that they both want to from the beginning, and it's like you just can. You actually just can. You could have a one night stand, sex positivity, do your thing, get your rocks off, live your life. I don't understand. Like you do not have to have this like unwitty banter back and forth for 3 months straight before you have sex. You could just have sex the first time you want to if both people are into it. That's also fine. Like the dragging it out thing, I'm like reading something like this, I'm like just make it erotica and make them have sex the first time they meet and then every time they want to after that. Or make the reasons for them not having sex more believable. Apparently he's plenty of humans. Where has he met all these humans? I was under the impression that there were not a lot of humans in this Fae realm, but apparently he's lots of them at some point. I mean, I guess he's been alive for a long time. Maybe he them 1,000 years ago, but okay. Oh yeah, no. I don't hate your kind. I'm just disappointed by how breakable you are. Emphasis not my own. If I held you down and you the way I'm imagining you right now, I doubt you'd survive it. I'm sorry, no. Someone telling me that if they f***ed me the way they wanted to, I would literally die is not attractive to me. Sorry, no, being f***ed to death, no, I don't sign up for that. Where's the exit? Like, why is that? That is not hot. Stop it. No, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Straight to horny jail with you. Oh yeah, more smelling. Your body's betraying you in other ways. I can smell you, little Osha, and I'm thinking about drinking the sweet nectar you're making. Sorry, I can't read this with a straight face. Sorry. I'll try to give you the full effect. Trying to channel Kingfisher's vibe of an angsty 1800-year-old teenager. That your body is betraying you in other ways. That I can smell you, little Osha. And I'm thinking about drinking the sweet nectar you're making for me straight from the f***ing cup. Sorry. Okay, sorry. No, I'm not sorry actually, because what the f***? Listen, again, consenting adults, having fun, great. Oral sex, 5 stars. 10 out of 10. Would recommend. Drinking the sweet nectar you're making straight from the cup is a no from me. It's a no. Please no. Why would you ever say it like that? Why are you making it so weird? Stop making it weird. I don't understand. She constantly has this internal monologue of like wanting to do something and then she's like, oh shit, I'm still not doing the thing I want to do. Let me go. Please let me go. Oh my God, let me go. And he's like, I'm actually not holding you. Like you're just standing here. And then she's like, oh, I am just standing here. Like, are you okay? Do you not have awareness of what your body is doing? Do you not have control over your own limbs? Because it happens so many times. It even happens later too, at times where she's just like, all of a sudden I realized that I still wasn't moving. Why am I not moving? I can't make my legs move. What's happening? Oh shit, I'm just still standing here. And it's like, girl, you could just move. You actually can. Of course, he baits her into kissing him because of course he does. Go on, pull back. I won't stop you, he said. Or you could kiss me. You could kiss me. I'll just sit here. I won't move a muscle. Why would I do that? Because you're intrigued, because you're bored, because you're super fucking aroused right now and you want to follow through on whatever little fantasies are playing out in your head. Yeah, right. I'm just going to kiss you and you're just going to sit there. You aren't going to move a muscle. You're not even going to kiss me back. Gods above, saying it out loud made it sound even more ridiculous because it is. You are an adult. Just kiss him, for God's sake. Oh my God. Kingfisher just stared at me. Find out. Was it temporary insanity? A complete loss of common sense? Whatever it was, it took me body and soul. I wish I was fucking kidding. I wish I was kidding. It's words on the page. Words on the fucking page or on the screen. Whatever. You get it. I lunged for him, curving into him, crushing my chest against his, driving my fingers into his hair. 1 second I was standing there, wanting very badly to put some space between us, and then the next, I was rising up onto my toes, still having to reach up for him, even though he was sitting down, and I was pressing my mouth to his. You are taller than most people in any room, and now you have to go up on your tippy toes to kiss him while he is sitting down. Like, I get that they are supposed to be super tall. You also are pretty tall. The fact that you have to go on tiptoes to kiss him when he's sitting down, that doesn't make sense, okay? I don't understand why authors constantly have to exaggerate things to such a point that they no longer withstand a critical eye, where things have to be so hyperbolic that they do not exist within the realm of reality. They can just be tall or big or whatever without being literally the most giant person to have ever existed for you to have to sprout wings and fly to reach their lips because they are so fucking gigantic. Why though? Like it gets more ridiculous every time, and it always has to be escalated by every new book and every new interaction. Even within one book, it's like every time it has to be described in a more ridiculous way so that people are still getting their rocks off to the height gap fetish or whatever the is happening. This was the kiss to end all kisses, demanding, urgent, and carnal. So dramatic. I hated this male, hated him with every fiber of my being, but curse me, I wanted him just as bad. Jesus Christ. Careful, he panted. I swore I'd be still while you kissed me. At no point did I promise to exercise restraint if you climbed up into my lap and started grinding yourself against my I hadn't. I wasn't. I had. I was. Again, no body awareness. She climbed into his lap without noticing, without even realizing I'd straddled him. My legs were wrapped low around his waist. His was rock hard, trapped between our bodies. I could feel it there, rubbing up against me, applying the most delicious pressure whenever I shifted my weight. Not f***ing happening. He reveals he has a dimple. Like, how f***ing dare he? Have a dimple? The audacity? Disturbing. I feel like things got a little bit better, mostly just because a lot was happening. Plot-wise, we finally were getting some movement with the plot after many chapters of just stagnating. This paragraph is also ridiculous and so over the top and melodramatic, but it did kind of make me laugh because he's not wrong. I'm stronger than you, idiot. I've spent hundreds of years forging barriers and wards around my mind that you couldn't begin to comprehend. My mind is an impenetrable vault, and I still paid a heavy price for my transgression. Your mind is as shallow as a fucking teacup. It would have splintered into 1,000 pieces if you'd stepped into that pool. It is melodramatic as shit, but he's not wrong. Muscles are always working. Muscles in the jaw are working. Muscles in the throat are working. Jaws are ticking. There's a lot of clenching. Everyone's going to develop TMJ in this world because the jaw tension is ridiculous. But this one just made me laugh because she really had to reinforce how hard the jaw was working. His hair fell into his eyes, the dark waves framing his face, the muscle in his jaw working, as he waited to read something to me that suggested I might break. I feel like, well, might be spoilers. Maybe I'll leave it for the spoiler section. I'll try to keep it spoiler free, just in case anyone watching this video still wants to read this book. I feel like I'm turning all of you off of this, but anyway. Suffice to say, for non-spoilers, that she makes yet another very reckless, rash, fast, and stupid decision, and then she makes another one very shortly after, because again, she doesn't even have 2 brain cells to rub together. It's very irritating. She has to ride a horse. She doesn't like horses. They start talking about genitals again because, of course, riding a horse has to do with your genitals for some reason. I used to ride, okay? I grew up riding. It doesn't hurt your genitals, okay? I mean, maybe it's different for people who have different types of genitals than I do, but for the internal type, it does not hurt your genitals to ride a horse, okay? Weird that she is making it seem that it does. And then, of course, it has to get weird again, and they have to talk about their genitals yet again. Like, just please. Put all of us out of our misery. I beg of you. He says, feeling a little sore, human? Sore doesn't come close, I grumbled. I'll happily kiss all of your aches and pains better for you once we strike camp. I've been told my mouth has healing properties, especially when administered between a pair of thighs. The suggestion in Kingfisher's voice was a promise made of dark silk, seductive, a little thrilling, if I was being honest. I wasn't in the mood to be honest, though. She's never in the mood to be honest, especially when it comes to her own feelings and her attraction, and it's exhausting. Like, is this book like 600 pages only because it takes her that long to admit that she actually does want to him? Because that is exhausting. People are dying, Kim. He calls his horse Bill, and it's just so that they can make the joke where she's like, Bill? Who would call his horse Bill? And he's like, I would. And it's so stupid because that does not fit the naming conventions of the Fae at all, nor does it fit the naming conventions of the human world. So it's just Bill because the author thought it would be funny for a reader to think about a horse named Bill. Stop trying to make Bill happen. It's not gonna happen. Later on here in this section, Kingfisher is giving intense beast vibes, like from Beauty and the Beast. And I Googled it, and apparently this is known to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which somehow no one had ever said that in any review I'd ever seen or any mention of this. It is very difficult to get me on board with a character who is like the Beast. That is one of the few exceptions to the rule, that movie. And there was one particular scene where she sees his bedroom and there are paintings on the walls and they've been slashed. And I was like, are we in the West Wing? What's happening here? He's very beast coded. Lots of growling and snarling and don't go into the West Wing and you'll do what I say and forcing her to have dinner with him. I have to say this for the spoiler section, but she's just so dumb. It's actually mind-boggling how dumb she is. You think that she can't get dumber and then she does somehow. It's almost impressive, to be honest. Oh yeah. And then, okay, another human is in this realm somehow. And Kingfisher is calling him a boy. He's 26 years old. He's hardly a boy, I muttered. He's an infant with a smart mouth as far as I'm concerned. So Kingfisher is seeing this 26-year-old as an infant, but he keeps trying to Saris, who is 24. Just gonna leave that there. Not even gonna touch that with a 10-foot pole. Yeah, he can detect her scent from 3 miles away. And not even her active scent, like he just smells her. He can smell her scent on someone else months after they had sex from 3 miles away. That is some powerful ode to genitalia, okay? What in the world? Like, this is kind of tied with spoilers, so I'm really trying to tiptoe around it. I'll read the quotes in the spoiler section properly, but I'll read this part because it doesn't have to be a spoiler and it's fucking gross, okay? There's every way, Fisher rumbled, his eyes darkening. I'd know the smell of you anywhere, on anyone. I'd know it blind and in the dark. Across a fucking sea, I'd be able to scent you. Weird and gross. Oh yeah, this also gave strong beast vibes, but also like kind of weird and creepy because he likens her to a newborn fawn. Again, weird vibes. We are nothing alike, he said quietly. You nearly died from a scratch that would have been a mild irritation to me. You are soft. You are fragile. You are vulnerable. You are a newborn fawn, stumbling around in the dark, surrounded by predators with very sharp teeth. I am the thing that exists on the other side of the dark. I'm the thing that puts the fear of the gods into the monsters who would eat you bones and all. Feels like maybe we shouldn't be then if you see her as a newborn fawn stumbling about. Pretty weird. Why are all the paintings torn up like that? I demanded. The tension crackling between us snapped like a cord pulled too tight. Because I destroyed them, he said flatly. Why? He exhaled, whirling away. Taking long, determined strides, he headed for the door. And just as he'd done at dinner before all hell had broken loose, he cast his voice so that it was right next to my ear. The rough edge of it so close made me startle, because sometimes my pendant can't stave off the darkness that creeps in. beast vibes. I feel like this exact back and forth happens in pretty much every romantasy I've ever read. I've never had a problem securing myself an invite. He was so sure of himself. His arrogance went beyond the pale. Well, don't count on an invite from me, I snapped, drawing the sheets up even higher beneath my chin. You're right. I don't think you will invite me. When the time comes, I think you'll beg. It happens every time. Her stomach is snarling again, because apparently you can't just say your stomach growled like a normal person. It has to snarl. Kingfisher tries to point out that he isn't an evil bastard by pointing out that he could be sexually assaulting her and he's not. So obviously he's not evil. Again, kind of a weird thing to say. Not gonna lie. There are orders of evil, and you can still be a bad person, even if you're not actively sexually assaulting people. And he's crossed a lot of boundaries, to be honest, to the point where I'm like, you are definitely harassing. Okay? Maybe I can read part of this. I feel like I have to read this to you, but I don't want to give anything away. But I'd order you onto your knees for me. I'd order you to part your legs for me. I'd order you to suck and me until you passed out from the exhaustion. Is that what you want, little Osha? If I compelled you to do it, you'd be innocent. Your actions wouldn't be your fault. You wouldn't have to face the fact that you wanted me. And I'd prove what a vile monster I was, wouldn't I? How vindicating for you to get exactly what your body is calling for while also being proven right. And it's like, that's not how consent works though. You know, like your body can respond to a situation without you actually giving consent and wanting something. Your body does not always react in concert with your brain. And so implying that the fact that her body responds when he says really sexually suggestive things out of nowhere to her, those things do not compute. It doesn't mean she actually wants to you. I mean, she does, because we're in her head, so we know she does. But like, you don't know that because you're not in her head, and smelling her scent does not mean anything. Just to get things straight there when it comes to how consent works. You can't just say, well, you were wet, so you wanted it. Still sexual assault. Okay. Also, why our main character is really obsessed with assuming and trying to guess the gender of the people around her for no reason. She's like, a fae person came up and I couldn't tell for sure, but I was pretty sure they were male because they were wearing pants. Oh wait, that's stupid. I'm wearing pants right now. And then at another point, she's like, I was pretty sure it was a male. Its voice sounded male. And it's like, why does it matter? Why are you so attached to whether they're male or female? Literally, these are side characters who have maybe a line and then they're gone again. Like, it's not relevant to the story, and their gender is definitely not relevant. So the obsession that she has with trying to figure out their gender based on the fact that they're wearing pants or the timbre of their voice is a little ridiculous. You're a demon with that blade. Plus, you're twice my size. Oh, please. He's 3 times your size. Again, everyone is a fucking giant. Giants among men. And the men were already towering over everyone else to exist. Another comparison for this other person of being an infant. Ren made him look like an infant struggling to find his feet for the first time. And again, she is younger than this person who keeps being referred to as an infant. So anyway, those are all the things that I think I can talk about that are non-spoilers. Now that we're getting to the 50% mark, there are more spoilery type things coming up. So I do have a few things to comment on that are probably spoilers. So those are gonna start now, and then I'm gonna go to sleep because it's late. What time is it even now? It's 2 a.m. I'm tired. This is a lot. So I'm gonna do some spoilers and I'm gonna go to bed, and tomorrow I'm really gonna try to finish this because I need to be done for my own sanity. She makes a deal with Kingfisher. I go and I try to get your brother. You help me and assist me in any way I ask you to, and you do as you're told. You agree to this pact. And she says yes, and this is a blood oath. You'll be bound by this oath until death. And she agrees to assist him in any way he asks her and do as she's told. Negative brain cells. So then, she realizes, oh shit, I have agreed to an oath where I have to do literally whatever he says. And he can control her. He can say, you're not getting out of this bed until tomorrow. And she literally can't exit the bed. She has no way to control her own body. So that's fun. Also turns out that he didn't find Hayden, her brother. He found Carrion, the last man she f***ed, because even though they fucked months ago, he can smell her juices on him from miles away. Just let that sink in for a minute. Yeah. And then he's so jealous and so disturbed by the fact that he can still smell her sex on him that he forces Carrion to take like 4,000 baths and be scrubbed down until his skin is raw, and then has him jerk off with Fae moss by water nymphs in the bath to try to get her smell off of his. That's a thing that happens. And then she agrees to a second deal because she's an idiot, that she will help him make enough relics for his people and then she'll be allowed to go home without finding out how many relics he needs for his people. No definitions, no specificity, and she still doesn't know how to make a relic. So that's fine. Turns out he needs like 15,000 relics. Because he wants one for each of his soldiers. So she's gonna be here for years. On the positive side, Carrion is here and he's mildly entertaining. So there's that. But yeah, so now we get into this realm where he can literally control her body. He can tell her to do whatever he wants and she has to, which is what ties into that whole section where he's talking about how if he was actually evil, he would force her to and suck him until she passed out, or whatever he says, which is so gross on so many levels. Cool. Love a threat of sexual assault from a male love interest and pointing out that they are in fact an angel because they have not assaulted you yet, even though they have power over you. Super appealing. Love that. Great. Yeah. Really, really attractive quality in a potential partner. And I just don't know how to come back from that, honestly, like to get serious for a second. I really, like, as ridiculous as this is, as much as I'm having fun making fun of this book and like it's so ridiculous at times, moments like that are genuinely concerning. Like, that is not okay behavior. And hopefully most of the people reading this are old enough and have enough maturity and experience to recognize that that is a dynamic that is only okay if both people have agreed on it ahead of time and have safe words and have determined that is something that they are, I don't know if it's dubcon or consensual, non-consent or whatever, but like regardless, going into it fully aware with both people knowing what's happening, both people on the same page, lots of communication and respect and understanding, safety, boundaries, safe words, all things that don't exist here because they're not in a relationship. They cannot talk to each other. They do not talk to each other. They don't respect each other. And he literally has the ability to control her body and force her to do things or not do things. She is not safe in this situation. So this is not a time where that is appropriate. And again, hopefully the people reading this, if they find this attractive, can, you know, seek out this dynamic in a much safer environment for themselves. I hope. But I just get worried reading books like this that some like 15-year-old is going to come across this book and read this and be like, ooh, that's a fun dynamic, and seek that out in their life and get into really dangerous situations that they are not prepared for. And maybe I'm just being overly worried and that's not likely to happen. But I just get concerned when I read dynamics like this presented in a really irresponsible way and framed as nothing out of the ordinary or nothing to be concerned about. Like, is this going to be addressed by the book that he essentially threatened to assault her, that's hanging over her head, crossing so many boundaries and not okay? Or is it going to be fine because she actually is attracted to him, so it doesn't matter? Because again, that's not how that works. Like, being attracted to someone doesn't mean that they can't assault you or cross your boundaries. Being attracted to someone or mutually attracted to each other doesn't mean that consent is not still valuable and actually super important every single time you have sex. So yeah, I'm just struggling with that on that more serious note. And I just don't think, I don't know, I don't feel like this book is handling this kind of content in a way that I feel is at all appropriate. And again, maybe I'm just not the audience for this. Like, this is not something that I am personally into, and that's fine. Like, different people are into different things. I don't remember anyone, again, of the many people I've heard talking about this book, talking about the fact that it has this kind of content, which seems like an important thing to mention because it's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea and could be triggering, I imagine, for people who have experienced assault. Like, it's just a lot to spring on readers out of nowhere. So yeah. Anyway, for a more serious chat at 2:30 in the morning, I don't even know if any of this is making sense. My brain is broken. I'm so tired. And also this book is, it's like it's giving my brain cells mercury poisoning and they are slowly shriveling up and dying. So anyway, those are just some more serious thoughts at the end of that, but that is it for spoilers. And those are my thoughts on the second quarter of the book up to the 50% mark. I'm on chapter 20, about halfway through chapter 20. And those are my thoughts. I don't know why I'm still here. Why am I still talking? Because it's 2:30 in the morning. That's probably why. I'm gonna go. I'm so tired. Okay, so I have now read to the 80% mark. I'm just at the start of chapter 36, and I have more thoughts. Shocking and appalling. I'm just gonna get right into it because I feel like I have so much to say. So much has happened, covering chapter 21 to the end of chapter 35, basically. And chapter 21 made me laugh because, again, like I said, every single person is taller or bigger than the last forever into infinity. Apparently here someone else is allowed to be properly bigger than Fisher because they have to fight vampires. Like I said, the Fae apparently started as vampires, or that was part of their, at one point they became vampires and then they stopped, but there are still actual vampires, both the sort of zombie undead vampires who are mindless and attacking them, but also high fae vampires who are just vampires. So anyway, they're going to fight off a horde of the undead zombie vampires because, again, this book is everything but the kitchen sink. We have the fae, but we also need vampires and zombies because of course we do. So anyway, they're going to try to fight off the horde and they're trying to cross over a frozen river. So they have these warriors whose job it is to try to break the ice so the vampires can't cross. Why can the vampires not swim? Or just walk through water since they're undead? I don't know. No one has an answer for that. It just is a fact, apparently. Although, that may or may not be retconned later. So, just keep that in mind. Anyway, we both stood there, stunned to silence, taking in the chaos. Huge warriors, twice as tall and twice as wide as Fisher, stood at the edge of the river. Twice as tall and twice as wide. If Fisher and Remphis are around the same height and they're 7 feet tall, you're telling me there are 14-foot tall warriors. Okay. Sure, whatever. Anything, it's fantasy, anything can exist, it's fine, whatever. So we have actual vampires, we're fighting the real vampires. It's very intense. We learn that the leader of the vampires, of the horde, is a guy named Malcolm. And there's nothing wrong with the name Malcolm. I actually like the name Malcolm, but it just feels so out of place in this world. It's kind of like the Bill situation. Again, Bill the horse, Malcolm the leader of the vampire fae. It just... With names like Renfis and Everlane and Kingfisher and Ceres, we then also have Malcolm and Bill. Perfect. Totally fits. It's funny to me because I feel like one of the major things I've seen repeated about this book is people thinking that the name Kingfisher is dumb. I actually don't really mind. I think it's fine. It sounds kind of like, I don't know, a weird name that a fae would have. It doesn't bother me. But what bothers me is characters named Malcolm or a horse named Bill in a world where her ex-buddy's name is Carrion. But I actually kind of like how the name Carrion sounds and how it looks spelled, so I don't really mind kind of ignoring the meaning of the word because I think it's kind of a nice name actually when separated from its meaning. Like I said in the past updates, she really doesn't seem to be worried about her brother Hayden, but the thing that bothers me the most is the last time she saw him, the last thing she said to him was basically that his entire existence has been a burden on her, and she is so sick of taking care of him and having to fix his mistakes. He is a burden. Get out of here. Horrible things to say to a sibling in any circumstance. And she has not once expressed regret other than in the actual moment that she said that to him. He doesn't even know if she's alive. And he doesn't know that she was exaggerating or lying to try to get him to leave to protect him. So she's just not concerned at all that he may be safe physically, but mentally he is dealing with the fact that his only living family sees him as a burden who she wishes she could cut loose. She's not concerned about that, though her defining character trait is that she is a great big sister who really loves her brother. Okay, sure. This may have happened in the last section, but I think I forgot to mention it. I just wanted to bring it up because I thought it was stupid. He's explaining their lifespans and the fact that, the Fae live a very long time. And she at one point asks a question about, because their lifespan is so long, is each life stage, equally long? Or, do they grow up a lot faster? Do they have the same length childhoods? How does that work? And he's like, oh, we definitely age faster than humans. We're fully grown by 21. I'm like, pretty sure humans are fully grown by 21 generally. Like maybe you might have one final growth spurt, but pretty much we're fully grown. We're adults by 21. So our offspring actually age twice as fast as human children. We're fully grown by 21 or 22. That's when the aging process slows down dramatically. How is that twice as fast as a human? Does a human take till they're 42 or 44 to be fully grown? What? So then they're talking about how they're definitely going to have sex, which is shocking to all of us. And she's saying, things are going to change between us. if we do this. And he's being super cruel and bad boy about it, because of course he is. He says, sure, I'll have scratched a perverse little itch. I'll be able to move on with my life. His lips parted, and the sight of his sharp canine sent a rush of warmth directly between my legs, because she's obsessed with his canine teeth for some reason. And then she tells him that he wants to bite her, and he gets worked up. The small amount of space between us disappeared in an instant. Fisher's hand closed around my throat, fury carved into the lines of his handsome face. Careful, he growled. It's dangerous to speak so flippantly about things you do not understand. Just casually grabbing her throat. There's a lot of choking in this book, both during sex and in lead-ups to sex. And not only do I personally not want to read about characters choking other characters in a sexual context, but also it's so dangerous and it's so not okay to establish a norm that choking without clear boundaries and making sure that there are a lot of safety protocols in place, because it is such a dangerous thing that can very easily kill someone. Making it this casual thing where he just keeps grabbing her by the throat where she can't speak or breathe, not okay. And actually, to me, feels like he's an abuser, because I'm pretty sure the stat is, I'll put it on the screen because I don't remember the exact amount, but some percentage of people who choke their partner ever will end up killing them. So that's great. Super romantic. Love that. And again, no conversation. Of course, later we find out that she's super into it and she wants him to do it. So that's great, I guess. But how would he know that? Because they never talked about it. You can't just assume someone wants you to do anything to them without talking about it. Although that's like Kingfisher's entire MO is just assuming he knows what she wants. But especially when it comes to something like choking that is so dangerous, you do not choke someone out of nowhere. Ever. The author brings up corsets again, but of course she has to say corsets and stays. Like, just pick one. If you just picked one from the start, I would have said, okay, in fae culture, they wear stays or they wear corsets. Why would they wear both corsets and stays? And you don't have to bring up both every time you bring them up. Without the corsets and stays of the dresses Everlane had made me wear in the Winter Palace, I'd taken to binding my breasts with fabric as I'd done at home. My breasts sprang free. Like, oh, they're so bouncy. As he's undressing her thoughts are racing, and it's so funny. She's like, had he thought about me like this, naked and at his mercy? Had he imagined what it would be like to touch me and taste me and have me willing to do his bidding? And I'm like, girl, he literally told you that. He's literally said to you all those things repeatedly, that he would have you at his mercy, that you would beg him. He's been pretty explicit about what he would do to you. So I'm pretty sure he's thought about it, because you have to think about things to be able to say them. I mean, maybe Saris doesn't, but most people do. Really? You're wondering if he's thought about it when he's actively doing it to you right now, and also has talked about doing it to you since the moment you met. Okay. We were either going to kill each other or each other, and I was glad we were both opting for the latter option. I would have gasped when he tore my underwear to the side and plunged his fingers into the molten wet heat of my core, but his hand closed around my windpipe, stealing my ability to breathe. Again, choking without consent or discussion or boundaries or safety. Stop choking people so they can't breathe. That is how you murder someone. Don't murder people. Obviously, if you're into choking, do you? But like, presumably you don't actually want your partner to murder you or vice versa. So you're gonna focus on safety. There is no safety concern here. And I get it's fantasy. But again, it's one thing for an adult to read this. Hopefully they're smart enough to realize that this is not how it should go. But I really worry about, the random 16-year-old who picks up this book because they see it all over TikTok and are like, oh, okay, so when my boyfriend grabs my windpipe, that's just a hot thing, not something I should be concerned about as a warning sign that your partner will murder you in the future. Are you going to scream for me like a good girl when I have you ride my face? I will never not be icked out by good girl. Ever. Especially in this case when he has already expressed that he thinks of people her age as infants. Makes it a lot creepier. She literally can't speak. It was no good. I couldn't speak. My head was spinning both from lack of blood and from the powerful need that rocked me to my core. The world went dark until there was only me and him. And I assume that the point of that is supposed to be expressing that she's so into this that everything else has disappeared. But as I was reading it, I thought, oh, she's passing out because he's been strangling her this whole time. But no, she doesn't. And then ironically, he says, when you take all of me, remember to breathe. That would be difficult to do since you keep choking her. Oh no, sorry. Right after that, he let go of my throat and my head swam as I dragged down a lungful of air. Again, no. Stop it. Once again, if they had discussed this, if they had safe words, although how do you do a safe word when you can't speak? I assume that people who are into this have figured out another solution, but they have not talked about that. And he has super face strength, so I imagine he could crush her windpipe permanently without even realizing he's doing it. Plus, he already said that he hates humans because they're so breakable, and if he her the way he wanted to, she would die. Again, red flags. Just a few red flags. Nothing to worry about, I'm sure. Graceless gods and holy martyrs. He wasn't wearing underwear. That didn't surprise me, but the sheer size of his erect as it sprang free from his pants made my eyes round out of my head. Round out of your head? That sounds painful. Were all Fae males this well endowed? Was it an Avalian thing? Or was this a Fisher thing? I'm sure it's just a Fisher thing. I'm sure all the other Fae have tiny little peens so that they could never compete with Fisher for your affection. With his clothes now gone, Fisher stood still, letting me take him in, an entertained little smile begging to be set free at both corners of his mouth. He was absolutely incredible, all hard lines and taut muscle and shifting ink. His was perfect, rigid iron wrapped in silk and velvet. Another check in the column, rigid iron or steel wrapped in either velvet or silk. His is both silk and velvet. It's the over-the-topness of it all. Like, it doesn't have to be, things don't have to be described like this for us to get that it's hot. Like, people are allowed to be like, ah, yes, this is a body part that I enjoy. I'm excited to see it again without it having to be the most extreme, huge, intense, intimidating, terrifying, beautiful, gorgeous, velvety thing you've ever seen. Like, you could just be normal about it, you know? Oh yeah, I forgot there's more smelling stuff. His mouth found the crease of my inner thigh first. I shivered, nearly leaving my body altogether when I looked down and met his eyes. He ran the tip of his nose up, 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 inhaling deeply as he went. No, thank you. I think I threw up a little bit there in my mouth. You smell so good, he said thickly. Back in the forge at the palace, I caught a hint of this. I knew then I had to taste you. This smell has been haunting my dreams. I haven't been able to think straight for remembering the scent of your need. I could probably use a do not dare finish that sentence, he snarled. I don't want a mouthful of soap and perfume. I want to taste you. No words. No words. I feel like I need a bingo card for this because all of the squares have been filled tenfold at this point. Not yet, he murmured against me. You don't get to come until I say so. Fisher, please, I panted. I want. Don't worry. I know what you need. I feel like he's about to break into song. Again, everything is just described in the most hyperbolic way possible. This wasn't just an orgasm. It was an awakening. Yes, I want it. I want you. His smile was pure, powerful male satisfaction. Hold on tight then. I hope you're not afraid of the dark. Get it? Because he's a shadow daddy. He has shadow magic. I hope you're not afraid of the dark. Is that his catchphrase or something? He has to have said that to literally every person he's ever right? Like, that can't be something he came up with on the spot. He definitely practiced that in the mirror. Like, I get that they don't want to write it like it's just a humdrum, same kind of sex you've had every time you've had sex in your life, but it doesn't have to be this earth-shattering, world-ending, dying and being reborn, seeing the universe explode in slow motion for infinity. Like, it's too much. Like, everything is the biggest and the hardest and the whatever. It makes it silly. It makes it really hard for me to take it seriously because it's not realistic. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I've seen multiple people post in romantasy spaces, especially the romantasy subreddit, saying that reading romantasy has ruined their real life sex life because the way it's described, it's so earth-shattering. You've just evolved into a new type of human based on how good this sex was, that they feel disappointed when they have sex with their real life partner because it's not like it is in the books. And maybe that's not up to the author to worry about, but it just something to keep in mind. Like, it's very unrealistic. Okay, so then we find out that she has been sterilized, that there's forced sterilization in place. What does she say? The third ward's the poorest. Madra's health advisors decided we shouldn't be allowed to procreate, otherwise we wouldn't be able to support ourselves. The policy's been in effect for over 100 years. 7 out of every 10 female babies are tagged when they're registered with the ward officials. I showed him this small black cross tattooed behind my ear, the mark that meant I wasn't allowed to breed. And he's obviously really upset about this, although he doesn't say anything, because of course he doesn't. He's the strong and silent type. But she seems happy about it. She's like, what's wrong? Aren't you happy that I can't get pregnant? Like, we don't have to worry about condoms? Isn't that something you would want? And she doesn't seem to understand that forced sterilization is probably not a good thing. She seems pretty against the ways that her ward is treated worse than others, but she doesn't seem to care about the sterilization thing. You know, regardless of whether she wants to have her own kids or not, that hasn't come up, I guess, because she knows she can't. But there's still an ethical issue there, the forced sterilization because people are poor, especially since they're kept poor by the system. But anyway, getting into spoilers here. So spoilers up to the 80% mark now. Oh yeah, like I said, Fisher is very broody and very jealous and possessive, and he shows up at the forge and Carrion is helping and being affable and being the best character in this book as per usual. And he's really upset about the fact that Carrion calls her Sunshine, his nickname for her. Don't call her Sunshine, he commanded. Why not? Because she is moonlight, the mist that shrouds the mountains, the bite of electricity in the air before a storm, the smoke that rolls across a battlefield before the killing starts. You have no idea what she is, what she could be. You should call her Majesty. Whoa, chill. And then her reaction is so funny. She's like, that's weird. He definitely doesn't even like me. And like, I know we had sex, but like, that was a one-time thing. That was very casual. It's kind of weird that he said all that. Wonder why he would say that. It's like, girl, he's obviously obsessed with you, but also obsessed with you in like a scary way, like a please run away, get as far from him as humanly possible kind of way, not in a romantic way. She has a mind and a mouth of her own. I am the keeper of neither. It's like, dude, you literally are. You made her agree to an oath that she didn't understand at the time, that she would do anything you said, and you have literally forced her not to speak before. So you could make her stop if you wanted to, but fine. Oh yeah, also, she is even more super special than we already thought. Like, there's lots of ways that she's already super special, but apparently no one has ever been able to control Quicksilver like her. Usually the alchemists could only either turn it from a liquid to a solid state, but she was able to shatter a sword into hundreds of tiny fragments, which is something that no one has ever been able to do before. Her reaction is, okay, so that makes me an anomaly? Yeah, literally everything we learn about her makes her even more special and one of a kind. That makes you the most powerful alchemist ever recorded, Lorith supplied, capable of changing how we've been fighting this war in ways we can't imagine. Perfect. And then she starts getting jealous of Fisher with the healer because he keeps going to the healer, you know, every time he's injured to get healed. And she's like, oh my God, I mean, maybe he's going to her just to be healed because she's a healer, but what if? And I'm like, girl, he just went off on a whole angry monologue to Carrion when he used his nickname for you, saying you're the wind beneath his wings. Like, I'm pretty sure he's not the healer. Oh yeah, and then of course we learn about the canines and the blood drinking because they can still drink blood, they just don't. And she asks Lorith, this warrior, about it, who is probably my favorite character now other than Carrion. Carrion and Lorith are pretty awesome. Ren is fine too. He just likes Fisher too much for my own liking. It makes me suspicious of him. But anyway, so she asks Lorith about drinking blood and he's like, oh, this is really not appropriate in this setting. Like, we're in public. Oh God. But then he explains it to her anyway. And basically it's a sex thing. You know, if they drink blood while they're having sex, what does he say? It'll make his dick harder than it's ever been in his life. And it makes them both euphoric. So she's now like, aha, perfect. I know what I'm gonna do next. And this whole time, not a lot is happening. We've had a couple battles, but mostly she's just doing 3 experiments a day because that's all she can do with the amount of silver she has before she has to refine it. And every time she does an experiment, it fails. So we're just getting day after day after day after day of her trying experiments to try to figure out how to make relics out of the Quicksilver, and every day she fails. And in between, there's, you know, a little bit of world building here, a little bit of world building there, some witty banter, some snarkiness, some snarling, lots of throats and jaws working, occasional sexcapades, you know, but that's really all that's happening in this section. I didn't take that many notes because what was there to take notes on, to be honest? Oh yeah, just in case we forgot how much she hates dresses. Archer showed me to another room down the hall, but that one was full of dresses, and I think we both know how I feel about those. Yes, we do, Saris. We all know. We are very aware. There's a female warrior in Fisher's inner circle, Danya, and it's her sword that was shattered into a bunch of pieces because she threatened to kill Fisher for reasons that are not even interesting, to be honest. And she's a bit aggressive. Fisher says, well, she's basically back to her old self. And Saris thinks he was joking. Had to be. No way anyone would have kept her around for so long if she was really this abrasive. And I'm like, says you. You are so ridiculously abrasive. And also Fisher is like the moodiest asshole of all time. What do you mean? Everyone here is abrasive. It hurt to see him like this, torn wide open by a grief that I could see now lived just below the surface of the stony, give no fucks facade he had presented to the world. Like, you didn't notice? It was pretty obvious this whole time that he was very depressed and grief-stricken and sad, and he was covering that up by being a huge asshole. And then she finally set some boundaries about this, like, compelling her to do things thing, where she says, if you use the oath you tricked me into to force me from this room right now, I will never forgive you. I will find a way to make your life absolutely miserable. In fact, while we're here and having such a lovely conversation about this, you're never going to compel me against my will again. Do you hear me? Do you understand? I am not around, Fisher. If you have any respect for me, if you care about me, even the tiniest, most minuscule amount, you will never, ever compel me again. Do you understand? And then he says, I understand. And I'm like, thank goodness, finally, after all this, it took you this long to say, yeah, never force me to do something against my will again, because that is very violating. The next 4 hours, not 1, not 2, 4 were rough. Like, okay, we got it when you said the next 4 hours. You could have just said the next 4 hours were rough, or the next hours were rough. We don't even have to know it was 4 hours. It's actually not relevant. He wants to hear a story to help distract him from the pain he's in, and she's like, I don't really have many happy memories in Zilvarin, so I don't really know what to tell you. And he's like, it doesn't have to be happy. I just want to hear something real. So then she gives her whole backstory and what happened to her mom and how she got to the situation she was in. And honestly, I find this both in poor taste, the story of her mom and the way it's framed, but also confusing because she said earlier, I swear, that her mom worked in a library or had access to a library, and that's why she could spend so much time in the library and it was nice and cool compared to being out under the two suns. But in this story, she goes pretty in detail into her mom's history and never once mentions the library situation, and talks about how her mother was a sex worker, and talks about how she died. And it's described in a very over-the-top, very gross way. And it's one of those things where, yes, you can write disturbing or upsetting things into books. Life includes those things. But sometimes I just get a vibe, you know, and you have to gauge this for yourself. But there are times when it feels like the author takes it too far and it turns into either trauma or it feels like they are doing it for shock value, or they're making it more horrifying or upsetting or gross or disturbing or degrading just to shock the reader and to make it more intense without it being, you know, a respectful or a thoughtful portrayal of the pain associated with something like that. Like, it doesn't feel like a respectful way to talk about a situation that real life people have experienced, to the point where she talks about her mother being murdered in the street and she witnesses it. And she says, I watched them slit her throat. No arrest, no trial. They love carrying out their sentencing on the spot. Saves time and energy, I suppose. She died face down in the sand in the blistering heat with 5 men pissing in her hair and on her back. Wasn't it bad enough already? Like, again, maybe that's happened to someone at some point, but I'm not sure how that adds anything to the story. It was already bad enough. Before she died, my mother had worked in the library back in the 3rd for a while. The underground warren of tunnels and hollowed out caves had resembled a tomb and had stunk worse than death. The tiny number of books it had boasted had been half eaten by mold, but at least it had been cool down there. 15 to 20 degrees cooler on a good day. The residents of the 3rd had to petition to visit the stacks. They needed a token and a recommendation from their employer before they were granted entry. My mother's position as a clerk there meant that she could come and go as she pleased, and that boon had been extended to me. So she worked as a clerk at the library shortly before her death, or just before she died, but there's no reference to that. It just talks about her being a sex worker, and it talks about everyone being really appalled by, you know, a woman of ill repute. How would she have gotten a job as the clerk at a library if she was a sex worker at the same time? It doesn't seem like these match up. I mean, maybe there's a way that they go together and it's just not being expressed to us very clearly, but it feels like the author just forgot that they already gave her mom a job and then decided a more tragic job would work better for this backstory. I don't know. We also learned that the whole quarantine thing was made up out of nowhere, that her house was the first house to be quarantined. They were first to get that big black X painted across the stonework, and then it was based on nothing. No one was actually sick, which I guess sort of answers a question I had back in chapter 1 that I have not thought about since because it's not relevant at all anymore, but okay. I wanted him more than I wanted to go home. Gods and martyrs, what kind of sister did that make me? A terrible sister, but we already knew that. Hayden needed me. Elroy did too, but in the moment, with the smell of him drowning out the entire world and robbing me of all common sense. I wasn't capable of feeling bad about that. There would be time for guilt aplenty later. Except she won't feel guilty later. She won't think about it at all. But for now, how to explain the feeling of a male like Kingfisher breathing heavily into your ear? It wasn't easily done. Then don't even try. It's fine. We can do without. Every warrior in Erin will smell me on you. Fisher's voice rumbled in my mind. Oh yeah, they can speak in each other's minds now. Of course they can. I'm going to make you hoarse from screaming my name. I'm going to mark you in every way imaginable so that everyone knows you're mine. Bite me, Fisher. It came as a breathless thought. I can't. Bite me. Do it. I want it. I can't. Bite me. And then he does. He bites her, obviously. The crescendo of pleasure came down on me like a landslide. I was crushed by it. It broke me and made my soul fucking sing. It was better than any drug I'd ever experienced before. This is the first time we've had mention of drugs. Do they have drugs? Is that a thing they have? How are they getting drugs? I don't know. Probably will never come up again. Again, it gets even more dramatic somehow. How do you top this? Like, I feel like it's like this because every author feels like they have to make their couple seem the most sexually compatible and the most fated to be together. So every scene has to be written more dramatically to compete against every other dramatic scene that's ever been written. And then the world ended. Existence blinked out into a blank void. The stars tumbled from the heavens and hell rose up to meet them. Everything and nothing, here and gone. It was every ecstatic moment I'd ever experienced condensed and multiplied 1,000,000-fold. My body became a fiery torch, and there was Fisher burning right alongside me. He mindlessly slammed himself into me, grunting, and then he ripped his mouth away from my skin and roared like he was dying. No, not like he was dying, like he was being reborn. Again, how do you top that? Are there going to be more sex scenes in this book? Because how are they going to be more dramatic than this? And obviously they have to be, because they could never just have like a morning quickie before coffee. That would be too domestic and boring. Also, after they had sex the first time, she ended up with a little tattoo of a bird. After they had sex the second time, she had tattoos all up her hands, words and runes and things. And she was a bit, confused and maybe a little disturbed, as you might be. And she asked him, as one would, what do these mean? How did this happen? She asks if they're magic, which is funny because obviously they're magic. They transferred to your skin just because you touched him. That's not how tattoos normally work. But anyway, and he sort of explains, but not really. He translates a couple of them, but he doesn't say what they mean at all because of course he wouldn't explain anything to her. But then he takes them away and says, I'm just temporarily removing them and you have a month basically to decide if you want to keep them or not. Carrion keeps helping her and actually gives her the information she needs to start making true progress because again, he's the best character in this book. Not only is he funny and likable, but he also is maybe the smartest person in this entire book, which is actually not that great of a feat because everyone is idiotic, but it still makes me like him. Probably my favorite chapter of this whole book was the chapter where she made the sword. I thought the scene was cool. I liked that she got to be good at something that she had worked hard on that made sense because I feel like everything else she's good at, there is no logical reason why she should be that good. Whereas at least working in a forge is something she has experience with and it feels like she trained for that. And I just liked all the different pieces coming together. Unfortunately, it went downhill from there. It's outrageous that he can sing too. Carrion had woken up and was stood to my right, arms folded across his chest, balefully regarding Lorith. That was nice though. Messed up, but nice. Love him. Saris doesn't deserve him, but someone should have gone for him. It's a travesty that he is single. I also liked finding out that the Quicksilver demands sort of ephemeral things as payment, and they wanted a song as payment, a song for them to keep, meaning that it would wink out of existence for everyone else. Although, of course, not for Saris, because she's the super special, most amazing, powerful alchemist to ever exist, so she will also remember along with them. But everyone else will forget that the song ever existed, and that is their payment to imbue the sword with magic. I'm Saris. I'm an alchemist. We know who she is. The Quicksilver hissed. She is the dawn. She is the moon. She is the sky. She is the oxygen in our lungs. Even the Quicksilver is weirdly obsessed with her. She obviously tries to talk to the Quicksilver in Kingfisher's head / eyeball, and try to coax it out. And they're like, yeah, no, not gonna happen. We are the same. We are one and the same. He can't survive without us. We can't survive without him. His hands worked deftly, adjusting the belt to fit my much narrower waist. And it was all I could do not to burst into tears. Oh yeah, because he gives her his father's sword, Solace, the sword that was stuck in the Quicksilver back in Zilverin that she pulled out. Apparently the fact that she could touch it means that she's basically meant to wield it, so she's gonna wield it now. Good for her. And then we go to a battle with the vampires, and remember how I told you earlier that the vampire zombies can't cross the water without the ice for some reason, but it's never explained? Well, now we find out that that's actually not true. They actually can cross. They can just, swim or walk across the bottom of the riverbed and come back out the other side because they are in fact already dead, which is a question I asked in the first scene that no one answered. And for some reason they couldn't do it before. Now they can. Never explained. But anyway, they're freaking out because they can actually cross now. Also, yet another moment where the author is just including stuff that feels really in poor taste, that just is shock value, because she's describing the variety of undead vampire zombies. And then she describes one, a woman with blackened hands and corkscrew dark curls, dragging a lifeless doll along behind her as she came. My stomach pitched when I realized it wasn't a doll. Like, it's already bad enough. You don't have to make it worse. Why are you trying to make it worse? Oh yeah, and again, and back to this thing where she's really oddly obsessed with identifying the gender of every creature around her, including undead vampire zombies. There was nothing he could do, gritting his teeth, Ren twisted, jamming his sword up through the skull of a vampire so disfigured that I couldn't even tell if it had been male or female. There are so many things wrong with that sentence that I don't even know where to start, because you'd have to be disfigured to be androgynous. I guess. Then at the end of the chapter, we find out that Everlane is with the vampires. She's been bitten by Malcolm, which means she has 3 days before she turns into a vampire, which means she's in his thrall. He can compel her to do whatever, kind of like Kingfisher can for Cerys. And in 3 days, if he doesn't let her drink his blood to become like a high fae vampire lord, she'll just die. Now they need to try to get Everlane back. And again, we have another moment of just being in really poor taste, threatening sexual assault in a way that feels just gross and unnecessary, honestly. And obviously, of course, Malcolm's ultimate goal, it's not to get Fisher back. He wants Cerys because she is the most powerful alchemist to have ever existed. And obviously he wants her. She's the ultimate prize. Duh. And then we get more lore, we get more information because she doesn't know what being a thrall means. She wants to know more about who Malcolm is. And they're explaining all this stuff about Malcolm, talking about how he's been alive for way longer than is normal for a fae. And they say he is a millennia old, undying, never aging. And I'm like, aren't they all a millennia old? Millennia literally just means multiple thousands. Like he could be 2,000 years old or 2001 and he would be millennia old. But Kingfisher is 1,800 years old, so he's not that far off. So why is this being framed as like the most ridiculous? He's millennia old. Like, okay, they literally all are. Oh yeah, and then Danya discovered that Lorith now has her sword and she's a bit pissed about it. And she tries to grab it from him. The second her hand closed around its grip, she unleashed a blood-curdling scream and her hand detonated into a cloud of pink mist. A shockwave of blinding white light surged from Avisiath's pommel and Danya was thrown across the map room. She crashed down onto a chair, reducing it to kindling in an instant. Holy gods, Ren uttered. It took her hand. Maybe she'll stop punching people in the face now. There wasn't a scrap of sympathy in Fisher's voice. Like, okay, geez, that seems a little extreme. But then it gets even worse because Cerys is a sociopath. Danya didn't deserve her hand to be regrown. Her theatrics had reached a point where she deserved to live with the consequences of her shitty temper. That wasn't a charitable thought on my part, but I was well and truly over her attitude. She'd been a bitch ever since Kingfisher had shown up back at the camp. We had more important things to worry about than a petulant warrior who threw a temper tantrum every time she showed up in this tent. Lucky for her, Fisher was more forgiving than me. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know being a bitch was deserving of having your hand literally exploded. Okay, good to know. So then Cerys, when are you going to allow your hand to be exploded? Because you are definitely infinite times more bitchy than Danya is. And you throw petulant tantrums literally every second. And then they do like a whole ritual and they all kneel to her because she's a great warrior and they have to honor how great of a warrior she is. And Kingfisher says her name, Cerys Fane, for the first time, and she makes a really big deal of it. But of course, I don't trust the book anymore, so I went back to look. It is true. He never said her name. He only ever calls her human or Osha or Oshalith or little Osha or whatever. He never calls her by her name. I did go back to check because, again, this book has completely shattered my trust and changed facts so many times and retconned things and contradicted itself that I did not just take it at its word that he had never said her name before. I had to check. Danya said something in Old Fay and spat on the ground, still cradling the smoking stump at the end of her right arm. But Danya. Danya was the worst. She's harboring a lot of anger. I had spent every waking moment in this place fighting to get home so I could save my brother and my friend. Have you though? Have you really? Don't think you have, actually. You've mostly forgotten that he exists 99.9% of the time. She's forging a relic and the Quicksilver wants her to give a secret, and her secret is she wants to stay in Evalia. She doesn't want to go back to Zilvarin. She just wants to bring her brother and Elroy and then stay with Kingfisher, which is not a surprising secret. Also, there is a scene where she tries the ring on and it's just Lord of the Rings. It's just putting the ring on and then seeing the shadow world, like in the movie. You can see the wraiths or whatever they are and everything's dark and spooky and shadowy. That's what happens when she puts the ring on. Okay, JRR. I see what's happening here. Carrion proving yet again that he is the best character in this book by trying to hit on the healer, and she's like, I'm so sorry, Carrion. I'm actually mated and married, so that's gonna be a no. And he's like, is he handsome? Carrion arched his eyebrow suggestively. I do love a husband and wife team. Maybe he'll let me join you both. I'm like, yes, Carrion. By King, confirmed. Also the best character in this book by far. And then, of course, Saris notices that the healer has tattoos and runes on her hands and is like, wait, hang on, what does that mean? And finds out that it's a mate's thing and is like, what do you mean it's a mate's thing? And then she learns even further that the type of runes she had were not only a mate thing, but also the fact that they were magically happened instead of actually being tattooed on with a tattooed gun means that they're an ancient type of super special mating thing. And the fact that she had words as well as runes means that they're extra special. They're like fated by the gods, and it's magic, and it's like ancient fairy tale stories, true mates blessed with marks from the fates, tragic love stories. So then of course she storms off to talk to Kingfisher about it. She's like, how dare you not tell me this was a being mates thing? And then he reveals that he actually knew she was coming this whole time. He's known for centuries about her because his mom was an oracle and she dreamed of Saris and used to draw pictures of her and told Fisher that that was going to be his partner in life. So as soon as he saw her, he knew who she was and didn't tell her, because of course he didn't. And then she's mostly just really mad that he dared make any kind of decision about them without telling her and didn't explain it to her, which honestly fair. And then he also explains that his nickname, the Oshalith thing, is actually a really cute, really romantic thing, and that he was actually in love with her from the first moment, because that nickname actually means most sacred, and they really care about the Oshalith butterfly, and people will risk their lives to protect them during their short life so that they can lay their eggs and continue the species. And it's actually a really big deal and a really romantic that he was calling her that the whole time. And he also didn't say her name because names are powerful, and this place, it's okay. And you showed up and you have one name and everyone knows it, and I couldn't say it because I was scared of what it would do to me when I did. It would be like acknowledging you were here after all this time, so I called you Osha instead. But it meant more, Saris. To me, it meant more. He was in love with her from the very start. Of course he was. So it was true then. Telena was right. Tragic, she said. The words echoed through the empty halls of my mind, growing louder with each repetition, which made me laugh so hard because yes, her mind is just empty. No thoughts, just vibes. And that's where I stopped, because honestly, learning that they're fated mates on top of everything else is just a bridge too far. I truly can't with this book. Literally everything but the kitchen sink. I wouldn't be surprised if they have sex in a kitchen sink, just to finish it off, tie it neatly with a bow. All right, spoilers finished. Every fiber of my being, not to be dramatic, would like me to DNF, but I've made it this far. I'm 80% of the way through, so I'm just gonna finish it. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go finish this book, and then I'll be back and I will give my final thoughts and rating and all that jazz. So off I go. I finished the book, okay? I think I entered a fugue state in those last couple chapters, but here I am on the other side of it, and I have in fact read every single one of the 600 and however many pages that are in this book. Oh, good Lord. Okay, so I don't know if I have that much to say about this last 20%. I feel like those are famous last words for me because I probably will now proceed to talk for an hour. But honestly, I took 0 extra notes in my reading tracker while reading this last section, though I do have some notes in the margins. I pretty much just pushed through. There was a lot of plot, a lot of stuff to happen at the end. Basically, at the end of the last chapter, or during the last chapter, Saris and Fisher got into a fight. A lover's quarrel, a lover's spat. So at the start of chapter 36, there's a lot of brooding and like dramatic, we can't be together, but we love each other, and looking at each other longingly across the room, and then being about to leave and then looking back, and the other one looks so sad, staring into the distance with rain coming down the window that they have to go and hold them, and they hug their legs and pet their head, and it's all very dramatic and emotional. Despite all of this, Saris finds time to continue to bash on the only other female character in the whole second half of this book, because Everlane is missing in action. Danya is the only other female character really, other than the healer, who shows up occasionally. I think she has lines in like one scene in the whole book. Scouring the books for ways to help Lane was useful. There could be something in here that solved our problems in the blink of an eye, but Danya wouldn't care. She thought problems could only be resolved by hitting something very hard, or else by stabbing someone repeatedly until they were dead, and she had no interest in being proven wrong. Like, she just hates her for no reason. And then later, Danya and some of the guys go to try to find a witch to help them out. And they come back and they're like, Danya just messed all of that up. She started being super bitchy to the witches, and they were not impressed, and now we're not going to get their help, and all is lost. And then we get this loveliness. That female is feral, Lorith growled. Next time she tries to hit me, I'm gonna put her over my knee and spank her, and not in a fun way. I would love to hear if this would be his response if it was a male warrior who was causing problems and punching people and being an asshole. Would he say that he was gonna put them across his knee and spank him? Somehow I doubt it. Somehow I feel like this is specifically meant to be a humiliating, infantilizing punishment for Danya because she is a woman, which just tanked my opinion of Lorith. He and Carrion were the only two characters I was enjoying, but now Lorith is firmly moved to the other category because what in the world? What in the misogyny? Pourquoi? Why? They finally convince a witch to help them, and she shows up, and she has fiery red hair, and freckles dominate her face, even scattered across her forehead. Has this author ever seen someone with freckles before? Freckles do typically exist in all areas of your face. Even if you don't have that many freckles, I have literally never seen a person who has freckles where they only sit across the bridge of your nose, like when people dot eyeliner on their nose to pretend they have freckles. As a person who has had freckles for my entire lifetime, I can guarantee that they appear everywhere, including your forehead. That is not a weird, out of the ordinary thing, especially for someone who is described as having freckles dominating their face. It's just like, why? Anyway, whatever. It doesn't matter. Moving on. There's so much to complain about. It's just, what? They have sex again, but they have it in a romantic way this time, so it's different. There's no choking this time because it's love-making, not f***ing. Although there is still blood. He doesn't drink from her, but he bites his own lip and bites her lip with his canines out. So there are multiple descriptions of blood flooding their mouths from the little puncture wounds in their lips, which is, very unappealing. The copper bright tang of blood flooded my mouth, and Fisher huffed out a hard breath, letting out a moan of his own. It coated both our tongues as he kissed me deeper. Like, that is gross. Sorry, it's gross. The taste of my blood intensified. Ew. Lots of very dramatic language, of course, especially because this time they are making love specifically. So we get lines like, my soul was on fire and I didn't care if I burned for all eternity. So long as I was burning with him, then so be it. Oh, but then of course we still get the cringy dirty talk because they couldn't possibly just be romantic. It also has to be down and dirty. When I get you out of these clothes, you're in trouble, he snarled in my head. I'm going to f*** you so hard you won't be able to sit down for a week. Perfect. Fisher growled as another fresh wave of blood flooded our mouths. Why? Why all the blood? What is with the blood? No. Ugh. If I wanted him to be, he would be the axis around which I revolved. I would be his. Two counterparts independent of one another, already whole, but together stronger than we could ever be apart. Oh yeah, and I guess this is technically a spoiler, but come on, there's no way that this is a spoiler for anyone. They're mates. They're fated mates. They're going to accept their mating bond and be mated forever. Like, never saw that coming. Your scent drives me crazy, Fisher rumbled. You're like a drug. You light me up. Again, where are people getting all these drugs? Like, this is, what kind of drugs are they doing? And light me up? It sounds like he goes to ragers on the weekends. Like, what is happening? He would be my end, this male. He would claim my better days and carry me during my worst. He would show me the meaning of ecstasy and drown me in it until I died. What's with all the people to death stuff? Weird vibes. I'm about to introduce you to all 7 gods. When you meet them, don't forget to tell them I'm the one you worship on your knees. When he comes, he cries out so loudly that it literally shakes the panes in the windows. And now that they've had their final climax for the story, we get to the plot climax. A lot happens in this last part, and I guess some of it is going to be spoilery depending on, again, if you're ever going to want to read this. Anyway, spoilers now for the last 20% of the book, chapter 36 to the end. Carrion figures out that the little shadow daddy portals that Fisher uses to transport himself around places are two-way, where you can, enter it from either end and go to the other place. So he's like, hey, why don't we just, go through? When he sends Everlane through, we can just go through the portal and then we'll be where he is and we can help him, right? And everyone's like, oh my God, I never thought of that, because everyone in this book is stupid, except for Carrion, which is why he's my favorite. Also, Ren got to his feet, letting out a long exhale. I could kiss you, Carrion Swift. Carrion seemed taken aback by this, and then somewhat interested. After thinking for a second, he said, I wouldn't be opposed, but maybe later. First, Saris has work to do, and I plan on giving her a hand. Which again, Carrion Swift, a bi icon. This is the representation that I am looking for, okay? The only bright, shining beacon of light in a total trash fire of a book. They decide that they're going to try to forge another sword for Carrion, where he's basically like, okay, I solved your problem, so now I demand a magic sword, please and thank you. And they requested a joke, so Saris tries to give them a joke, and this is the joke she thought would be worthy. Have you heard about the fire at the circus? It was intense. Get it? Intense. Unsurprisingly, the Quicksilver was not impressed. But luckily, again, our king, Carrion, comes to the rescue. And he starts telling bawdy, sexual, raunchy jokes. And the Quicksilver thinks this is hilarious and loves them. And turns out that they actually just love Carrion and they want to bind with him and they totally find him worthy to have his own sword and they really love his jokes. So I'm happy for them. Match made in heaven. Of course, Callie Hart has to use the stupid joke again of naming something a name that doesn't work within the naming conventions to be funny. But because it's Carrion doing it, I will give it a pass this time. He names his sword Simon, which is stupid. But again, Carrion gets a pass because he is the only good part of this book. They decide to go try to save Fisher. I love the moment where they go through the portal and then things happen on the other side and they finally have a moment to breathe and Saris just recaps everything that just happened again in her own mind for no reason. Just a paragraph of her talking through each point of what happened since they went through the portal. It hasn't even been a full chapter. I'm pretty sure we remember what happened. Do you need help remembering? You just said 2 chapters ago that you have an excellent memory. What is happening? Anyway, they go through this portal. Turns out the portal drops them in the middle of the air and they fall into the water. And because Carrion and Saris grew up in a desert, essentially, with very little water, they don't know how to swim. So they almost drown. They both survive. And then they find themselves at this huge amphitheater and they're in the vampire court and they realize there are all these people, all these undead who are chanting Anarath Mor, Anarath Mor, Anarath Mor, which is what she's heard the Quicksilver saying this whole time. And it turns out that it means release us. So all these people are trapped. And we learn that all of these people are all the victims of Kingfisher, but really the real truth is that these are all the citizens, like 20,000 citizens of a city, and Malcolm and all his vampire horde came to the city and were turning all these people. And Kingfisher tried to save them with a blood oath. He agreed to abide by whatever happened at the flip of a coin when it landed on the ground. If it landed on one side, he could kill them all and save them from eternal damnation. And if it landed on the other side, he could, I don't remember, save them somehow. Anyway, doesn't matter. So he agrees to the oath with Bellicon, I should say. His stepfather is the one who is there because he is in league with Malcolm. Shock and awe and surprise. So instead of it landing on the ground when he flips it, Malcolm just snatches it out of the air and they're like, ha ha ha, you don't get to do anything or decide what happens and you can't save them because it didn't land on the ground. So too bad. And you can't interfere with it till it hits the ground. So now you're just stuck. So he decided to burn down the city to stop them from being able to be used as a horde or to try to save them, except it didn't save them because they are now in this like undead eternal suffering state. So I still am not 100% sure why he felt that burning down the city was the right choice. I guess maybe there was something about that making them ineligible to be used as soldiers by Malcolm, but then later on Malcolm says, no, they were going to be my soldiers. So I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. So then we learn the reason he was gone for 110 years is that he was in this labyrinth Malcolm built for him where he was trying to get to the center where the coin was, and then he got to the center and there was just a huge pile of coins and he had to try to figure out which was the real one so that it could finally land on the ground and he could save all these people from their eternal suffering. But he never found it. And then there was a pool of Quicksilver at the center and it opened up when Cerys pulled the sword out of the stone, like King Arthur, and he jumped through and never finished his quest of getting to the center. And they're hearing all this from Bellicon, his stepdaddy and Everlane's dad, and Malcolm, the king of the vampires, and Madra, the queen of Zelvarin, who was also here. And they're all in league together. They're the triumvirate. They're buddies. They've been working together. She did try to screw them over by sticking a sword into the pool because Bellicon sent an assassin through to try to kill her. But, you know, let bygones be bygones. They're apparently siblings, or at least they're calling each other brother and sister. Once again, Cerys is like, I need to understand what this means. What do they mean by brother and sister? And I'm just going to take it as fact that they are in fact brother and sister, meaning that they are siblings, unless someone tells me otherwise, and no one has to the end of this book. So I guess they're just siblings, which is fine. And they were bickering, I guess, which is why, you know, Madra thought that the Fae would send someone through to kill her. Also, Heron, the head of her guard who initially killed Cerys, and then she killed him, and then she went through and was saved. He's actually not dead, and apparently he's been alive for as long as Madra has been. She just keeps him alive. Hear all this, you know, they get the villain monologue where they explain everything that is happening. There was never any war. Apparently, Bellicon was just feeding his brother's army. He was just sending people out there to constantly fight them to be killed and turned into the undead zombie warriors, which is why he never sent any weapons or tried to support the front. It was just a way to keep feeding his brother's army, I guess, for some reason. There are so many tiny things I could nitpick at the end here, but I'm so tired, y'all. I can't. I need it to be over. So I'm just gonna keep going. I'm trying not to get distracted by small things and focus on the big picture. So anyway, Fisher's really pissed, especially at Madra, because she spayed his mate, which is a really weird way to put that. And Cerys finally realizes in this moment that the forced sterilization was maybe not okay, which is wild for her to have never realized until now. We learn that Malcolm is in love with Fisher, or at least a bit obsessed with him, and wanted Fisher to feed from him for sexual gratification, I guess. And Fisher seems very disturbed by this. So I don't know. I got like kind of weird vibes from the way that Malcolm was being portrayed there, and the fact that they were so utterly grossed out or disturbed by the fact that he was calling Fisher my love or was attracted to him, that they did not have for Madra, like rubbing her boobs up against him and talking about how hot he was and wanting him to be her plaything. They didn't have the same level of disgust for her. There was more like jealousy or like, no, he's mine. But then with Malcolm, that was like, the tone shift was just interesting, you know, just noticing things, just noticing how the one villain who is openly queer is being represented. So then they run into the labyrinth and they are trying to make their way through, and there's this giant, really creepy spider fae monster thing that they have to try to run away from, and they get to the middle and they're trying to determine where the coin is. Madra and Malcolm and Bellicon show up and they're like, hee, you will never get away from us. And then Carrion starts being really antagonistic to Malcolm, and everyone's like, Carrion, shut the fuck up. Like, you're a human, he's Vampire King, this is a bad idea. And he keeps antagonizing him until Malcolm starts drinking from him, and then he's like, what the this isn't right, and starts disintegrating. And Carrion's like, ha ha ha, my name is Carrion Swift, but there was a time when I was known as Carrion Dianthus, firstborn son to Rurik and Amelia Dianthus. So he is the long lost heir of the Dianthus line that's been in Zilvarin. You know, that hint that seemed to be pointing to Sarah's this whole time, it was actually Carrion who was the long lost heir. And because of some like convoluted history stuff with the Dianthus line having to do with the creation of the vampires or the creation of the cure for the vampires, he can't drink from the Dianthus line because that will make him very sick, and so that's what's happening. And while everyone's distracted, Fisher's like, hey, Saris, you can detect tiny amounts of Quicksilver, and that coin definitely had a little bit of Quicksilver in it. You should definitely try to find it somewhere in this labyrinth. And she tries to find it, and she realizes it's in the throat of the creepy fey spider creature that they slaughtered, and she has to reach into its mouth and pull it out, and she finally has the coin, and she's so excited. But then Malcolm shows up, and he's somehow not dead, and then he disembowels her, and she's like, God damn it, not again, and steals the coin. But then she steals it back because she's a thief, and she lets it drop to the ground, and Malcolm's like, no, how dare you? And his whole horde of apparently people who couldn't be his soldiers, because that's why they were burned, but he wanted them to be his soldiers, so he's upset that they're gone. I don't know. All get to finally rest in peace and are no longer in eternal suffering. And all the Anarath more stops because they don't have to chant to be released because they have been thus released. So then she's dying because she's been disemboweled for a second time. And Fisher's like, please let me give you part of my soul to save you. And she's like, no, I don't want you to do that. That's probably going to be bad for you. Don't sacrifice yourself for me. I don't want to live if you're going to die. So don't do it. And then Malcolm's son, basically, or the second most powerful vampire that he had turned, Teladius, is like, well, I could turn her into a vampire to save her. And she's about to pass out and can't speak. And Fisher's like, fine, do it. So she's going to be turned into a vampire. And then they're about to travel away, I guess, to help her continue to heal and go through this transition. And she hears the Quicksilver talking to her and trying to convince her that she should just die. Bad things are about to happen. Just let go. And she's like, no, I can't. I want to stay with Fisher. Oh yeah, and when she was looking for the coin, she was really struggling to hear it, and she asked the Quicksilver for help, and they said they would help her for a small favor. So now they're like, okay, we call in our favor. We want an audience with you. And she's like, okay, fine. And she gets yanked back through the labyrinth all intensely and gets dropped through the Quicksilver. And she shows up on this grassy knoll, and there are these two teenage girls there who frolic over and ask her what sex is like with Kingfisher. For some reason, that's the first thing they want to know. And they are Baal and Mithrin, two goddesses, and they are who the two sons on her planet or in her realm are named after. And then she goes to talk to their dad, who is the god of chaos, Zareth. And he's like, yeah, you and Fisher were always meant to be together, but in every timeline, in every way you could meet, you basically heralded the apocalypse. And that seems like a bad thing. So I tried to separate you. You were supposed to be born in Ilveria with the Fae as a Fae, but I made sure you would be born in Zilvarin instead to try to keep you apart. And then you ended up together anyway. And now I've realized that there's no way to keep you apart. So if you're going to be together, I would like to sever you from the gods' control, so basically make you invisible to the gods so that they can't keep meddling in your fate. And the only way to do that is to transform you into something they've never seen before. And she's like, okay, fine. If this is the only way for me and Fisher to be together, then I agree. And she goes back, and it turns out he turned her into a half vampire, half fae. Which maybe I'm misunderstanding, but this whole time I thought all the vampires were also fae, like they were fae vampires. But apparently they're just vampires, not fae vampires. So the fact that she is half fae, half vampire, and apparently no longer any % human means that she is something never before seen. And everyone's very shocked by what that even means and what traits she's going to have from the fae and what traits she's going to have from vampires. And anyway, she has long, sharp canine teeth now, which she was very turned on by, so good for her, and pointy ears, which she was apparently always meant to have anyway. Very special, never before seen kind of creature. She talks a bit to Carrion. He's taller now because he's in his fae form, obviously. Learns a little bit about his history, which I liked. Honestly, him talking about his backstory made me think that this book, I mean, I already thought this, but even more so made me think that this book would have been significantly better if Carrion was the MC. His story is fascinating, honestly. Fisher shows up, and they're very happy that they're together again. Very lovey-dovey. She goes to look out the window and notices, oh shit, we're on the wrong side of the darn. we're still in vampire territory. And Fisher's like, oh yeah, so about that, in Evalia, the rulers name an heir, and if they don't name an heir, whoever killed them is meant to take over. And you killed Malcolm, so all the vampires are waiting for you to be crowned their leader in a couple days. And she's like, I'm not even fully vampire. I'm half vampire, half fae. How could I lead them? And he's like, tell them that. As far as the vampire court is concerned, you're to be coronated. In 2 days' time, you officially become the new queen of Sanis Roth. And that is the end of the book. She's gonna be a vampire fae queen. Because of course she is. And yeah, that's the whole book. I love that we got to the end of this book and she still has not seen or talked to Hayden again, which was the whole inciting incident, her drive to do anything apparently at the beginning. It just became completely irrelevant. And like Everlane was kind of important there for a bit and then she disappeared. She doesn't regain consciousness at the end, so it's like she wasn't even there. Other than a few info dumping, world building conversations with lots of exposition between Everlane and Saris in the first couple chapters, I'm not sure this book passes the Bechdel test. There are almost no female characters. Also, no mention of Onyx, her fox, anywhere near the end there. They're just gone. She's not concerned, no one else is concerned. The fox might as well have not been included in this book at all because it was totally irrelevant. But yeah, the only good part of this book for me was Carrion. I liked Carrion. I wish this had been about Carrion because everything else was mind-numbingly overwritten and melodramatic and stupid, and she hates everything and everyone. Wow. What an experience. Oh my God, I can't believe it's done. It's been like 4 days. Has it been 4 days? 3 days? Something like that. It feels like it's been an eternity. I don't even know what to do with myself now that this book is done. I could read literally anything, and probably literally anything I pick up would be better than this. It's amazing. I feel so free. This was pretty terrible. Why was it so long? So unnecessarily long. So many of the things that were established at the beginning ended up being completely irrelevant or just retconned. I just like lots of main characters. Maybe not lots. I just like main characters semi-regularly, and I dislike male love interests often because of all the tropes that I do not like. These two really take the cake though. They're pretty insufferable, especially when they're together, and just how cringy all the dirty talk was and all their romance talk and just all the hyperbole and the I'll go to the end of the universe to explode into stars to be in your eyes forever as your fated mate, whatever stuff was just too much for me, too silly. There was just so much in here to hate. So I hope you enjoyed all this ranting. Wow. You might be able to tell that I did not have a good time with this. I think this book gets 1 star. Yeah, that 1 star is for Carrion. He is a star, so he gets a star. Gold star for you, Carrion. My heart. Everything else gets no stars. None for them. This was painful. You know, I complain about books all the time. I'm critical of the books I read. I think that's a good thing. I think being critical is great. I think you can read a book for fun or escapism and have a great time, but also be aware of the problems. I just can't have a fun time when there are this many problems. I can't just wipe all those away. It is too distracting. And maybe if this book had all those problems, but at least the main character was interesting and likable and her love interest wasn't just an emo teen brutally skulking in corners, maybe I would have been able to find some escapism or enjoyment in this. Carrion was in far too little of this book to make up for any of the other mess. It was chaos. I swear this book was not edited at all. Would I recommend this? I mean, if you've watched all the way through this, you have heard a lot of the factors. If for you, those are pluses, not minuses. If you're a fan of the possessive, overbearing asshole love interest who will randomly choke you out of nowhere, and again, no shame, I feel like my tone is implying something that it does not mean. It's just been a long couple days. That's fine. If you're into that, you'll probably really like this book, as many people seem to have. If that's your cup of tea, this cup of tea is piping hot. But if you do not enjoy those things, as I don't, I would definitely not recommend. It will not be what you're looking for. It will be insufferable. I think even if you like all those tropes, you'll probably notice the plot holes and the, weird grammar and spelling mistakes and redundant sentences and, weird choices. retconning, inconsistencies, all that stuff still exists, but it might not bug you if you like the tropes enough, if you like the characters or the romance enough. If all that is your cup of tea, then it might be worth reading and you might enjoy it as much as, again, many thousands of people seem to have loved it. But yeah, not for me. So that's this video. I feel a little, demoralized is the wrong word. Exhausted. I feel exhausted. This was quite the ride. But anyway, that's this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment for the algorithm because this video has taken a lot of effort and a lot of willpower to actually push through on, and I did it completely for all of you who requested I read and review this book. I hope it was worth it for you. I am feeling mildly traumatized. Hopefully my naturally terrible memory will do its thing and wipe all of this in 5 to 10 business days. But as it is now, I need to live with it. Hopefully I don't have any vivid dreams in that time. Thank you again to Pretty Litter for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in my description box or use this QR code and my code plantbasedbride20 to get 20% off your first purchase and a free cat toy. I love Pretty Litter. My cats love Pretty Litter, and I'm sure you will too. And that brings us to the end of this video. Let me know in the comments what book you think I should dedicate a whole video to like this, really getting into the nitty-gritty with all the quotes and the tea. 1 star for Quicksilver. What a ride this has been. I need a nap. Until the next one. Bye, friends.